Picture New York City in 1890. Every day, ships arrived carrying thousands of Europeans who'd gambled everything on a fresh start. Between 1840 and 1910, over 4 million of them came through. What they found wasn't quite what they'd imagined. Take the Bohemian immigrants, Czechs and Slovaks mostly. They'd end up in tenement buildings where landlords divided single rooms into smaller and smaller spaces. Some of these rooms had no windows at all. You'd work 17 hours a day for wages that barely covered the rent, and if you couldn't speak English, well, you couldn't exactly argue about it. For many Bohemians, there was another problem: tobacco. They'd end up working in the cigar-making trade, often right there in their cramped apartments. That smell never left. It was in the walls, in your clothes, in your lungs. This is the story of those tenements and the people who lived in them. Okay, so, if you're here a lot, you know I ask for likes and subscribes. But seriously, where are you guys? Comment your location and time. Sometimes I see someone from California listening at 3 p.m. and I'm like, are you napping? All right, New York tenements in the 1800s tonight. But wait, are you comfortable? No, really, check. Pillows, blankets, the whole deal. Where we're going, you'll want to be settled. You wake up gasping, not from a nightmare, but from the air itself. Thick, brown, choking. Your lungs struggle to find anything resembling oxygen in this soup of tobacco dust. The smell has penetrated everything. Your clothes, your hair, your skin. After 6 months in this room, you can taste it even in your dreams. It's 4:30 in the morning, still dark outside, but your family can't afford to waste daylight. Not when every minute means pennies, and every penny stands between you and the street. You're awake because the coughing started again. Your father's deep, wet rattle from the corner where your parents sleep. Your mother stirs too, not because the coughing woke her, but because her body knows the schedule by now. Work begins before dawn. Welcome to 1879. Welcome to the tenements of New York's East Side. Welcome to life as a Bohemian immigrant. You swing your legs off the edge of the narrow bench where you and your 2 siblings sleep. Your feet touch the floorboards, sticky with tobacco sap. The room is maybe 15 feet by 15 feet, but it's not just a bedroom. It's kitchen, living room, dining room, and cigar factory all at once. Joseph, your mother whispers in Czech, get the water. You're 10 years old, but in this world, childhood is a luxury for rich Americans. You grab the bucket by the door and head down the dark hallway, past 6 other apartments just like yours. Inside each one, a family of 5, 6, sometimes 8 people, all waking up to the same routine, all choking on the same tobacco air. The communal water pump is in the backyard, 4 flights down. In winter, the trip is brutal. Tonight's September chill is just a warning of what's coming. You've been in America for 6 months, arrived from Bohemia, what some now call the Czech lands, with dreams your parents wouldn't even speak aloud. Dreams that have shriveled faster than the tobacco, leaves you stripped for 14 hours a day. Let me paint you a picture of what it was like back then, says my historian friend who spent 3 years researching these tenements. Imagine the worst apartment you've ever seen. Now remove the plumbing, add 6 more people, and fill it with toxic fumes. That was luxury compared to what these folks endured. The pump screeches as you work the handle. 3 other children from neighbouring apartments are already filling their buckets. Nobody speaks, partly because of exhaustion, partly because words feel wasted when your stomach's been empty since yesterday afternoon. You think about the bread your mother will slice for breakfast. 1 thin piece each, no butter. You think about the 12 hours ahead, your fingers working alongside your parents and sisters, stripping tobacco leaves, rolling cigars, your hands permanently stain the colour of rust. Oh, and here's something they don't tell you in the history books. That tobacco stain, it never comes off. These cigar workers had permanently brown fingers their entire lives. Imagine walking around with hands that look like you'd been gardening in mud forever. That was their reality. Back in the apartment, your mother has already cleared the workbench of last night's sleeping blankets. Your 5-year-old sister is still asleep in the corner on a pile of tobacco sacks. She'll get another hour before she too joins the production line. Your father sits at the bench coughing into a rag. When he pulls it away, you pretend not to see the flecks of blood. Everyone knows what it means, but nobody says it. Consumption. The tuberculosis that claims so many in these buildings. The disease doctors now link directly to tobacco dust inhalation and the windowless rooms where you both work and sleep. "Good morning," he says in Czech, trying to sound strong. He's been in America 9 years and still can't speak more than 10 words of English. None of the adults in your community can. There's no time to learn, no opportunity to practice, and honestly, no point. Your world is these few blocks of the Lower East Side where Czech is the only language that matters. You pour water into the basin, splash your face, and take your place at the bench. The tobacco is already there, delivered last Friday from the manufacturer, the same man who is your landlord. He owns the building, provides the raw materials, and buys back the finished cigars. He sets the prices for both your rent and your work, and the math never adds up in your favour. Let's break down the economics, because this is where it gets really twisted. The typical Bohemian family paid between $10–12 per month in rent for a tenement apartment in the 1870s. For that same family making cigars, the going rate was about $3.75 per 1,000 cigars. Working from dawn until night, we're talking 17-hour days, a family might produce 3,000 cigars in a week, earning 11.25. So basically, after killing themselves for a solid week, they'd barely cover rent. Food, medicine, clothing, good luck. Your fingers start the familiar dance, separating leaf from stem, sorting by quality, preparing the wrapper, the binder, the filler. Every cigar a tiny work of craft that will sell for more money than you'll see in a day. "Hey, what's happening in the streets today?" your father asks, a morning ritual meant to distract from hunger and fatigue. You shrug. Mr. Novak says there's talk of another strike. The cigar makers on 38th Street want $5 per 1,000 instead of $3.75. Your father snorts. "And I want a mansion on 5th Avenue. Talking won't change anything." Your mother gives him a look. "Joseph is just answering your question." "And the landlord's just answering the market," your father says. "We ask for more money. He shows us the line of new arrivals getting off the boats, willing to work for less." He's right, of course. Every week more Bohemians arrive, each family more desperate than the last. The landlords know exactly what they're doing, keeping everyone just desperate enough to work, not quite desperate enough to rebel. The sun begins to creep through the building across the narrow alley, your only source of light. It barely qualifies as a window, just a small opening that gives you a view of the brick wall 12 feet away. In the summer, the heat is unbearable. In the winter, the cold seeps in. There is no good season in the tenements. As the light grows, you can see the full reality of your home. The walls, once white perhaps, have turned the colour of tobacco juice. The ceiling is cracked, with water stains from the leaking roof. In one corner, despite your mother's constant cleaning, a family of cockroaches has built a dynasty. They thrive on the tobacco scraps, unbothered by the poison that's slowly killing the humans. You're probably thinking, why didn't they just move somewhere else? Or, why not find different work? Trust me, they tried. The problem was threefold. First, they had no money to relocate. Second, they didn't speak English, which eliminated most jobs. And third, this is the kicker, many landlords were also the tobacco suppliers and cigar buyers, creating a closed system that was basically modern slavery. I interviewed an economist who specializes in 19th century labor conditions, and he told me, what the Bohemians experienced was a perfect trap. They were bound by language, geography, skill set, and economics. Breaking free required resources they couldn't possibly accumulate while caught in the system. By 7 a.m. the entire family's at work. Even little Anna, barely 5, sits on a small stool, carefully separating tobacco leaves and handing them to your mother. Your sister Maria, 12, is faster than you, her fingers flying over the workbench. She's been doing this since she was 4, doesn't remember a life before cigars. The building comes fully alive now. Through the thin walls you hear coughing, arguments, the crying of babies, the rhythmic sounds of work. Someone is singing a Czech folk song 3 apartments down, a mournful tune about homeland and loss. It makes your mother's eyes water, though she'll blame it on the tobacco dust. A loud knock at the door makes everyone jump. Inspection, says your father grimly. The Board of Health occasionally sends inspectors to the tenements, not to help, but to ensure the cigars aren't being made under unsanitary conditions. The irony is staggering. The inspectors care about the cigars, not the people making them. Your mother hurriedly wipes down the workbench, kicks a pile of scraps under it, and opens the door with the closest thing to a smile she can manage. The inspector is American, tall and well-fed, his nose wrinkling at the smell that is your everyday existence. He barely glances at the room, makes a note on his clipboard and moves on. The entire inspection takes less than 30 seconds. What did he write? Your sister asks. Your father shrugs. Who knows? Something about us being dirty foreigners, probably. The reality was even worse than that. You know what Jacob Rees, the guy who eventually documented these conditions, discovered? That many inspectors were on the payroll of the same landlords they were supposed to be monitoring. The entire system was corrupt from top to bottom. By noon, your fingers are bleeding slightly where the tobacco sap has made the skin crack. This is normal. Everyone's hands look the same, calloused, stained, split at the knuckles and fingertips. Your stomach growls, but lunch is still an hour away. Through the small window comes a shout from the street, someone calling in Czech. Your father perks up, listens intently. Strike, he translates, though everyone understood. The 38th Street factory is on strike. For a moment the work stops. Everyone looks at each other, the unspoken question hanging in the tobacco-thick air. Should we join them? Your father slowly shakes his head. We can't afford it, he says simply, and returns to his work. Your mother doesn't argue, but you see something in her eyes, a flash of anger, quickly suppressed. She's the one who keeps the family's meagre accounts. She knows better than anyone how precarious your situation is. In your pocket is the rent receipt from last week, $11.75 for one room with a small window. The cigars you'll make this week might bring in $11.25 if you work from dawn until midnight every day. The math is simple and brutal. You will always be in debt to the landlord. At 1 o'clock your mother slices the dark bread, 1 piece each, with a thin scraping of lard if you're lucky. Sometimes there's a pickle to share. Today there isn't. This is going to sound weird, but one of the most valuable skills in a tenement was knowing how to slice bread thin enough that it seemed like more than it was. People literally developed techniques to make 5 slices look like 10. That's the level of poverty we're talking about. I heard from Mrs. Svoboda that her cousin found work in a restaurant, your mother says quietly, the words almost conspiratorial. Real work, away from tobacco. Your father nods but says nothing. Everyone knows the story of Mr. Holub, who tried to leave cigar making for construction work. The landlord evicted his family the next day. They spent 3 nights on the street before Mr. Holub begged for his cigar job back, at a lower rate than before. After lunch, if you can call it that, it's back to work. The afternoon drags, the air getting thicker as the room heats up. By 3 o'clock, little Anna is asleep at her station, her small face pressed against the workbench. Your mother gently moves her to the corner sleeping area without breaking her own rhythm. Through the walls, you hear Mrs. Novak in the next apartment begin another coughing fit. It goes on for nearly 5 minutes. Nobody mentions that these fits have been getting worse for weeks. Nobody mentions that Mr. Dvořák upstairs had similar coughing before they took him away last month. He never came back. Okay, so you know how when you get a cold and your chest feels tight for a few days, multiply that by 1,000 and make it permanent. That's what chronic tobacco exposure did to these workers. Their lungs were literally coated with the stuff. Modern doctors who've studied the autopsies say their lung tissue looked like cured meat. At 6 o'clock there's another knock. Not an inspector this time, but the tobacco delivery man. He brings the week's supply and takes away the finished cigars, counting them meticulously. This week, 2,170 cigars. Not enough for what you need. Short again, he says in broken English, one of the few phrases he's bothered to learn in your language. Boss not happy. Your father nods grimly. We'll make more next week. The man leaves, and your father's shoulders slump. We need to work longer tonight, he says, though everyone is already exhausted. We worked until midnight all last week, your mother points out. Then we work until 1, your father snaps, then softens. Just until we catch up. But everyone in the room knows a terrible truth. You will never catch up. The system is designed that way. Dinner is bean soup, watery but hot. Your mother saves most of her portion for your father, who needs strength to keep working despite his worsening cough. You all eat at the workbench, careful not to spill on the tobacco. Through the small window you can see lights coming on in the tenement across the alley. In one room, a family of 8 gathers around their own workbench. In another, a woman rocks, a crying baby while 3 other children sleep on the floor beside her. These glimpses into other lives identical to yours are your only entertainment, your only connection to a world outside your own walls. The night deepens, and still you work. Your eyes burn from strain and tobacco dust. Your back aches from hunching over. Your fingers move mechanically now, muscle memory taking over where conscious thought has surrendered to fatigue. At 11, little Anna wakes up crying from hunger. Your mother gives her the crust of bread she'd saved from her own lunch. It quiets the child, but everyone feels the pain of not having enough. Not enough food, not enough space, not enough money, not enough hope. The landlord, who stops by sometimes in the evening to check on production, pokes his head in around midnight. He's a large man, Czech like you but different. He came 20 years earlier, learned English, figured out how to become the exploiter rather than the exploited. Still working? He asks, sounding pleased. Good, good. Need more cigars this week. He doesn't mention that last week he raised the rent another 25 cents, or that the price he pays for cigars has dropped again. He doesn't have to. Everyone understands the arrangement. After he leaves, your father mutters something under his breath, a Czech curse that would earn you a slap if you repeated it. "He was one of us once," your mother says quietly. "I remember when he first came to New York. He lived in a room like this." "And now he owns the building," your father replies bitterly, "because he climbs on the backs of his own people." This was common, by the way. Some of the worst exploiters of immigrants were earlier immigrants from the same countries. They knew exactly how to manipulate the system and their countrymen. By 1 in the morning, even your father admits defeat. The day's work has yielded another 150 cigars. Not enough, never enough, but all that human exhaustion can produce. Your mother clears the workbench, lays out the thin blankets that transform it into a bed for you and your sister. Little Anna is already asleep in the corner. Your parents will sleep on the floor tonight. Your father's cough is too bad for him to lie flat. As you stretch out on the hard wooden surface, your body aches with a tiredness that sleep can't cure. Tomorrow will be the same, and the day after, and every day until what? Until your father's cough takes him, until the landlord raises the rent beyond even your 17-hour work days, until some miracle no one really believes in anymore. You close your eyes, but the smell of tobacco follows you even into your dreams. It's in your clothes, your hair, under your fingernails. You've forgotten what clean air tastes like, what food tastes like without the flavour of tobacco overlaying everything. Through the walls, someone is crying. Someone is always crying in the tenements. You drift towards sleep. You're lost. Conscious thought, a question that has no answer. How did we trade one prison for another? How did we cross an ocean for freedom, only to be trapped more completely than before? As you drift off on your hard bench covered with a thin blanket, surrounded by the rank smell of tobacco that will follow you all your life, I want you to think about something. Right now, in your comfortable bed, with your clean air and full stomach, you're experiencing more luxury than these people could even imagine. That's the thing about history. We think of these people as characters in a story, but they were as real as you and I, with dreams and fears and the desperate hope that tomorrow might somehow be better than today. But for the Bohemians of New York's tenements, tomorrow was almost always exactly the same as yesterday. An endless cycle of work, exploitation, and survival on the razor's edge between subsistence and starvation. And as night falls on the Lower East Side, thousands of families just like yours settle into uneasy sleep, surrounded by the tools of their trade and the inescapable smell of the tobacco that is both their livelihood and their slow death. Morning arrives like it always does in the tenements, announced not by sunlight, which barely penetrates your narrow window, but by the sounds. First, the coughing, dozens of tobacco-scarred lungs clearing themselves across the building. Then the water pumps squeaking, the hallway floorboards creaking, babies crying, and finally the rhythmic sounds of work beginning. Your father is already at the workbench when you open your eyes. His silhouette hunched over tobacco leaves in the dim light. He didn't sleep again. The cough kept him sitting upright all night. "Dobre rano," he says without looking up. "Good morning." You stretch your aching back. The workbench makes for a hard bed, but it's better than the floor where your mother slept with little Anna. Maria is already up too, splashing water on her face from the basin. "The Novaks got evicted last night," she whispers. "I heard them being put out." Your stomach tightens. The Novaks lived 2 doors down, a family with 5 children. Mr. Novak had been sick, unable to work for nearly a month. Where will they go, you ask? Maria shrugs. The street, the poorhouse. Does it matter? They're gone. And that's the thing about tenement life that history books can't quite capture. The constant terror. One missed rent payment, one bad week of production, one illness, and you'd be on the street. No safety net, no savings, no second chances. Your father overhears. "This is why we work," he says, his voice flat. "This is why we don't join strikes." Your mother stirs from her place on the floor, her face lined with exhaustion. At 35, she looks 20 years older. She was beautiful once. There's a small photograph from the old country that proves it. 6 years in the tenements have worn that beauty away, replaced it with a permanent mask of fatigue. "We should wash the bedding today," she says, ignoring the conversation about the Novaks. "It's been 3 weeks." The unspoken reality is that washing the bedding means losing at least 2 hours of work, 2 hours of production, money the family can't spare. "After we finish this bundle," your father replies, nodding at the tobacco. "We're still short from last week." You take your place at the bench as the small room fills with morning light, though light is a generous description for the grimy illumination that filters through your one window. The familiar smell of tobacco wraps around you, so constant you only notice it now in the first moments after waking. "Grab the water, Josef," your mother says, and you head out with the bucket. The hallway tells its own stories this morning. The Novak's door stands open, the small room already being cleared of their meagre possessions. 2 men you don't recognize are carrying out a broken chair. They don't look at you. At the end of the hall, old Mrs. Dvořák sits on the floor outside her apartment, softly crying. Her son was taken to the hospital yesterday. Everyone knows what that means. Nobody has money for hospitals until it's too late, and few come back. The hallway itself is a health hazard, narrow, with peeling wallpaper and floorboards that sag underfoot. The shared toilet at the end serves 28 people across 5 apartments. It hasn't worked properly in months, and the stench competes even with the tobacco smell. I visited a preserved tenement museum in New York a few years back, and let me tell you, even the cleaned-up museum version was shocking. The original toilets were basically holes in the ground located in the backyard. By the 1870s, they'd upgraded to shared hallway toilets, but those were often broken, and one toilet might serve 20-30 people. Imagine your worst public bathroom nightmare, then multiply it by 10. You carefully step around a puddle of something you don't want to identify and make your way down the 4 flights of stairs. Each floor houses similar stories. The immigrants might come from different parts of Europe, but the conditions are universal. Poverty speaks its own language. In the backyard, which is really just a small concrete area surrounded by towering tenement walls, the water pump is busy this morning. A line of 5 people wait with buckets. You recognise Mrs. Cherney from the 2nd floor, her infant strapped to her chest. Her husband was a blacksmith in Bohemia, a skilled tradesman. Here, he rolls cigars in their apartment because his lack of English makes other work impossible. "How is Jan?" you ask in Czech. "Her husband has been coughing worse than your father." She doesn't meet your eyes. "The same." You wait your turn, fill your bucket, and begin the long climb back up. By the time you reach your apartment on the 4th floor, your arms ache and half the water has sloshed out despite your careful steps. This trip happens 4 or 5 times a day, more if someone is sick and needs extra washing. Up and down, bucket by bucket. just one of the countless inefficiencies that keep tenement life balanced on the edge of impossible. Back in your apartment, the day's work has begun in earnest. Your mother has cleared the sleeping blankets and laid out fresh tobacco leaves. The leaves arrive damp and need to be dried to the perfect consistency. Too wet and the cigar won't burn properly. Too dry and it burns too quickly. "Look at this," your father says, holding up a mouldy leaf. "They're sending us the worst quality now." Your mother examines it with practiced eyes. "We can still use most of it. Just cut away the bad parts." He makes a disgusted sound, but does as she suggests. You all know you can't afford to waste anything. The reality of cigar making in tenements was this constant compromise. Companies would send lower quality tobacco to the home workers, saving the premium leaves for their factory operations. The tenement cigar makers had to make do with whatever they got, and still produce perfect cigars. Your sister Maria has already begun stripping leaves, her fingers moving with practiced precision. At 12, she's been doing this work for 8 years. She doesn't remember a time before tobacco stained her hands. "I heard something yesterday," she says, not looking up from her work. "Mrs. Svoboda says there's a school for immigrant children. Free." Your father snorts. "Nothing is free. The Americans run it, to teach English." Your mother glances up briefly. "We need her hands here." And that's the conversation. A child's hope raised and crushed in the space of seconds. Education is a luxury that belongs to different people in a different world. Here, small fingers stripping tobacco leaves are worth more than minds learning to read. I talked to a historian who specializes in immigrant education, and she told me that many Bohemian families desperately wanted education for their children, but literally couldn't afford to lose the labor. A child in school meant maybe 20% less family income, and when you're already barely surviving, that's impossible. The morning passes in the familiar rhythm of work. Strip the leaves, sort them by size and quality. Prepare the fillers, the inner tobacco that gives the cigar its body. Roll the binder leaf around the filler to hold it together. Then the final step, the wrapper leaf, the visible outer skin of the cigar that must be perfect, without tears or blemishes. Your father handles the wrapper work. Despite his illness, his fingers still possess the delicate touch needed. Your mother prepares the fillers. You and Maria strip and sort. Little Anna, now awake, sits on her small stool picking out stems and veins from the leaves, work suitable for 5-year-old fingers. The room grows warmer as the day progresses. Sweat beads on your forehead, making your eyes sting when tobacco dust mixes with it. There's no ventilation beyond the single window, which offers little relief. In summer, the temperature inside can reach 100 degrees. In winter, it barely rises above freezing. At noon, there's a knock on the door. Everyone freezes. "Rent," says a voice in accented English. Your father nods to your mother, who goes to the battered tin box kept under a floorboard. From it she removes a carefully counted stack of coins, $11.75, nearly every cent the family has. When she opens the door, the landlord, Mr. Kaufman, barely looks at her, just holds out his hand for the money. He's a large man with a prosperous belly and fingers adorned with gold rings. 20 years ago, he arrived from Prague just like your family. Now he owns half the building and supplies tobacco to most of its residents. "Still sick?" he asks, glancing at your father. "Getting better," your father lies. Kaufman grunts. "Production was down last week. We'll make it up. You'd better. New family arrived yesterday from Praha. 6 people, 3 adults who can roll. They're looking for work and space." The threat doesn't need to be spelled out. There's always someone more desperate willing to take your place. After he leaves, your mother's hand trembles as she shuts the door. We don't have money for food now. Your father doesn't look up from his work. We still have some bread, and I'll ask Pani Horakova if she can spare potatoes. Her son sends her money sometimes. This was the brutal reality. Rent always came first, no matter what. Food was the flexible expense. People literally starved to keep roofs over their heads. The afternoon drags on. Through the open window comes the sound of street vendors, children playing, horses clopping on cobblestones, the life of the city continuing beyond the walls of your workroom prison. You ventured into those streets exactly twice since arriving 6 months ago. Once to help carry home a large tobacco shipment. Once to help the Dvořáks when their son collapsed on the stairway. The rest of your existence happens within these 4 walls. My hands are sticky, little Anna complains, holding up fingers coated with tobacco residue. Your mother wipes them with a damp cloth. Just a few more hours, Milachku. By 4 o'clock, hunger has become a hard knot in your stomach. The last proper meal was yesterday's lunch. Your mother notices you slowing down. Take a piece of bread, she says quietly, just a small one. The loaf is stale and hard down to the last few slices. You break off a piece the size of 2 fingers and chew it slowly, making it last. The taste of tobacco clings even to the food. It's in the air, on your hands, everywhere. Another knock on the door makes everyone tense again. But this time it's Mrs. Horakova from upstairs, her round face appearing when your mother opens the door. I heard the Novaks, she says without preamble. Is it true? Your mother nods. Mrs. Horakova makes the sign of the cross. God help them. She lowers her voice. I heard Kaufman already has a new family moving in. 7 people? 7? In that room? Your mother's voice betrays her shock. The Novak's apartment is even smaller than yours. 3 children, 4 adults, from Plzeň. She hesitates, then adds, I have some soup. I can share. That night, your dinner is a watery potato soup brought by Mrs. Horakova, stretched with the last of your stale bread. It fills your stomach without truly satisfying, but it's more than you expected. These small kindnesses are what keep tenement families alive, the invisible network of shared resources, borrowed cups of flour, divided loaves of bread. After dinner, work continues. Nobody in the tenements can afford to respect conventional working hours. Every waking moment is potential production time, every idle hand a luxury. Tell me about Bohemia again, little Anna says as she sorts leaves by lamplight. About our village. Your mother's expression softens for the first time today. It was green, so green your eyes would hurt from looking at the fields, and in spring, flowers covered the hills like coloured blankets. Why did we leave? Annie asks, though she's heard the answer many times. Because there was no food, your father answers bluntly. No work. The landlord took everything, and then wanted more. Like here, you say without thinking. Your father looks at you sharply but doesn't contradict. The parallels are too obvious. One form of exploitation traded for another. My great-grandfather came from Eastern Europe around this time, and he used to say, we didn't escape poverty. We just moved it to a different country where we couldn't even read the signs. At 8 o'clock, there's a commotion in the hallway. Voices raised, a child crying. Your mother cracks the door to look out. The new family, she reports, moving into the Novak's room. You all listen to the sounds of furniture being dragged, children being shushed. 7 people in a space barely big enough for 4. Tomorrow they'll begin the same cycle of tobacco and debt that claim the Novaks. When Mrs. Horakova comes to retrieve her soup pot, she lingers in the doorway. "They're saying things might change," she says in a hushed voice. "A man was in the street today talking about organising, about unions." Your father looks up. "The unions don't want us. They call us rate busters." The term is bitter in his mouth. The established cigar makers' unions have long viewed Bohemian immigrants as enemies who undercut wages by accepting lower pay. They don't acknowledge the impossible situation that without English, without other options, any work at any wage is better than none. This was different, Mrs. Horakova insists. This man spoke Czech. He talked about all workers together. For a moment, something like hope flickers across your father's face. Then he shakes his head and returns to his work. Talk is cheap. Rent is expensive. After Mrs. Horakova leaves, the atmosphere in a room changes. Something has been introduced. A dangerous idea, a possibility. No one mentions it directly, but it hangs in the air alongside the tobacco dust. At 10 o'clock, little Anna falls asleep at her station, her small head nodding forward onto the bench. Your mother carries her to the corner sleeping space, a grim smile touching her lips as she brushes hair from the child's forehead. "She looks like my mother," she whispers, "around the eyes." These moments of tenderness are rare treasures in tenement life, brief reminders that behind the work-roughened hands and tobacco-stained fingers are human beings with memories, with histories. By 11, your own eyes are struggling to stay open. The day's production sits in neat piles, 470 cigars. Not enough, never enough. "Go to sleep," your father says suddenly. "All of you. I'll finish this batch." "You need rest," your mother argues. "Your cough." "I'll rest when we've made quota. Go." The tone of his voice makes clear this isn't a suggestion. Your mother hesitates, then begins clearing part of the workbench for you and Maria to sleep on. She and Anna will take the floor corner again. As you lay your tired body on the hard bench, covered only by a thin blanket, the sounds of the tenement create their nightly symphony. Arguments and love-making, children crying and old people praying, drunken singing and quiet sobbing, all filter through walls thin enough to pass tobacco smoke. From your father comes the steady sound of work, leaves being stripped, wrappers being rolled, the quiet desperation of a man trying to outwork death itself. "He's getting worse," Maria whispers beside you, quiet enough that only you can hear. "I know. What will we do if—" She doesn't finish the sentence. You have no answer. Without your father, the family production will drop by at least a third. With it, any hope of meeting the rent, of feeding 5 mouths. The ash barrels that stand in front of the big rows of tenements on 71st and 73rd Streets tell their own stories, filled to the brim with the stems of stripped tobacco leaves. Even the garbage of the tenements is marked by the industry that both sustains and kills its residents. Through the small window you can see lights still burning in apartments across the narrow alley. Other families, other workbenches, other lives mirror to your own. The woman directly across hasn't left her apartment in the 3 months you've been watching. She sits at her bench 18 hours a day, rolling cigars with mechanical precision, a living automaton. Your eyes grow heavy as your father's silhouette continues its work in the lamplight. His cough punctuates the night, but his hands never stop moving. In the morning you find him still at the bench, slumped forward, finally overcome by exhaustion. The night's work. Another 100 cigars, neatly piled beside him. Your mother places a gentle hand on his shoulder, and he starts awake, immediately reaching for more tobacco. Enough, she says softly. Rest now. We'll continue. For once he doesn't argue. He makes his way to the corner space vacated by Anna, who's already at her station sorting leaves. He lies down and is asleep within seconds, his breathing ragged and shallow. The rank smell from the workbench follows you into the hallway as you go for the morning water. It's in your clothes, your hair, under your fingernails. You've forgotten what clean air tastes like, what food tastes like, without the flavour of tobacco overlaying everything. On the stairs, you pass one of the new family's children, a boy about your age, with the same hollow-cheeked hunger you see in the mirror. He nods slightly in recognition of a shared fate. It's not always like this, you want to tell him, but that would be a lie. It is always like this. Day after day, leaf after leaf, cigar after cigar. As you fill your water bucket in the yard, you notice a piece of paper nailed to the pump. It's written in Czech, the letters carefully formed. Meeting tonight, church basement on Orchard Street. For all cigar workers, united we stand. You stare at it for a long moment, memorizing the words, before continuing back upstairs with your water. You won't mention it to your father, not yet, but you tuck the information away, a tiny seed of possibility in the barren soil of tenement life. Back in the apartment, the day's work has already begun. Your mother has taken your father's place at the wrapper station, though her fingers lack his practice skill. Maria strips leaves faster than ever, making up for lost time. The routine continues, the same as yesterday, the same as tomorrow. Strip the leaves, sort them, roll them, repeat. The cigar maker's endless cycle. But something has changed. A current of tension, of possibility, runs beneath the surface. The whispered conversations in the hallway, the paper on the pump, the new family arriving even as the old one was forced out. The system that keeps you trapped depends on isolation, on the belief that there is no alternative. But what if there is? What if Mrs. Horakova is right, and things could change? As you take your place at the workbench, your hands automatically resuming their familiar tasks, you allow yourself something dangerous, a small, fragile hope that tomorrow might be different from today. Even as the tobacco dust settles on your skin and the familiar smells wrap around you like prison walls. The next morning begins like all others, in darkness, with the taste of tobacco already in your mouth before you've even opened your eyes. But today carries something different. The paper on the pump, the whispers in the hallway, the meeting. Your father is still asleep when the rest of you begin work, his body finally surrendering to the exhaustion and illness he's been fighting for months. His cough punctuates the quiet morning like a grim metronome. Let him rest, your mother says when you glance at his corner. We'll manage. And so the day begins with just 4 pairs of hands instead of 5, a devastating reduction in a family that needs every finger working to survive. The process of making cigars is both art and torture, a skilled craft performed under impossible conditions. The tobacco arrives damp, the leaves entire. Before anything else can happen, it must be prepared. Joseph, sort these, your mother says, pushing a pile of leaves toward you. Wrappers separate from fillers. This is the first step, identifying which leaves are suitable for the outer wrapper, the visible skin of the cigar, and which will go inside as filler. Wrapper leaves must be perfect. No tears, no holes, no discoloration. Imperfect leaves become fillers, the invisible interior. You thumb through the pile, your hands automatically separating the leaves into categories, wrapper, binder, which holds the filler together, and filler. Your fingers are so stained with tobacco that they look like they're wearing brown gloves, permanent discoloration that marks cigar workers as clearly as a brand. Wait, I need to tell you something wild about this tobacco staining. When Bohemian immigrants tried to get other jobs, employers would immediately spot their permanently stained hands and know they were cigar workers. It was like a tattoo they couldn't escape. Some would try scrubbing their skin raw with lye soap, but the stain had penetrated too deeply. While you sort, Maria works on stripping, removing the thick centre vein from each leaf. She uses a small, stumpy knife with a worn wooden handle, her fingers moving with practiced precision. The veins pile up in a basket to be discarded in the ash barrels outside. Little Anna's job is simpler but crucial. She sorts the stripped leaves by size, creating neat piles that will later become different sizes of cigars. Her small fingers work diligently, though she frequently stops to wipe her eyes, irritated by the tobacco dust that hangs in the air like a toxic fog. Your mother has taken over your father's role at the rolling station. This is the most skilled part of the process, where flat leaves become the finished product. She begins with the filler, carefully arranging the tobacco to ensure it will draw properly when lit. Too loose, and it burns too quickly. Too tight, and it won't draw at all. Around the filler goes the binder leaf, rolled to create the basic shape. Then comes the wrapper, the outer leaf that must be applied with perfect smoothness, no wrinkles, no tears. She uses a natural vegetable gum to seal it, then trims the ends with a circular cutter called a guillotine. "Not tight enough," she mutters, undoing a cigar and starting again. "Your father could roll 4 in the time it takes her to perfect one. The room is eerily quiet without your father's stories. Usually he fills the monotony with tales of the old country or songs from his youth. Without him, there's only the sound of work, leaves being torn, knives scraping, the soft thud of the guillotine trimmer. By mid-morning your fingers are already aching. The tobacco sap makes them sticky, and the constant fine movements leave your joints stiff. The dust makes your eyes water and your throat scratch. But stopping isn't an option." "How many did we make yesterday?" Anna asks, breaking the silence. 570, your mother answers. "We need at least that many today." The math is simple and brutal. At $3.75 per 1,000 cigars, that's barely $2.14 for a day's work by 5 people. Less than 43 cents per person for a 17-hour day. And from that must come rent, food, clothes, everything. You know, I actually calculated this once. Adjusted for inflation, these families were making about 60 cents per hour in today's money. Imagine working 17 hours to earn $10. That was their reality. A knock at the door startles everyone. Your mother quickly wipes her hands on her apron and answers it. Standing there is the boy you saw on the stairs yesterday, the one from the new family. "My mother asks if you have thread," he says in Czech, his accent marking him as from a different region than your family. "Our baby's shirt is torn." Your mother hesitates only briefly before retrieving a small spool of thread from a box under the bench. Thread is precious, used for clothes, for emergency repairs, occasionally even for binding cigars when the vegetable gum runs low. But in the tenements, these small kindnesses are survival currency. "Tell her she can keep it," your mother says, pressing the spool into the boy's hand. "And what is your name?" "Tomasz," he replies. "We're from Plzeň." "Come back later if you need anything else," your mother tells him. After he leaves, she explains, "They're new. They don't know yet how things work." This subtle dance of resources, knowing who has what, who needs what, when to share and when to hoard, is crucial to tenement survival. No family has enough on their own. Only through careful sharing can anyone survive. By noon, your father finally wakes, his face grey with exhaustion despite the hours of sleep. He tries to take his place at the bench, but your mother firmly directs him to the single chair by the window. "Count and pack today," she tells him. "Your hands aren't steady enough for rolling." He starts to argue, but is interrupted by a coughing fit so severe it leaves him gasping. When he pulls the rag from his mouth, fresh blood stains the fabric. Everyone pretends not to notice. The packing and counting is the final stage of production. Each cigar must be inspected for flaws, then arranged in bundles of 50 for delivery to the buyer. It's less physically demanding work, but requires focus to ensure consistent quality. One bad cigar can result in an entire bundle being rejected, work and materials wasted. Your father sits by the window, carefully examining each cigar, arranging them in neat rows. His fingers, once the fastest and most skilled in the family, now tremble slightly. "What's happening at the factory?" he asks, trying to sound casual. "I heard there was a strike starting." Your mother gives you a sharp look that clearly says, "Don't mention the meeting." "Just talk," she replies. "Nothing will come of it." But something has shifted in the building. You can feel it in the air, hear it in the hushed conversations that stop when doors open. The isolation that has kept the Bohemian workers divided is cracking, just slightly. The afternoon drags on, each hour marked by the changing angle of the meagre sunlight through your small window. By 4 o'clock you've made only 320 cigars, far below the needed pace. "We need to work faster," your father says, stating the obvious. "We're doing our best," your mother replies, an edge to her voice that rarely appears. The tension in the room rises with the heat. Without enough output, there won't be enough money for both rent and food next week. Everyone knows this. No one says it. At 5 o'clock there's another knock, but this time it's Mrs. Horakova. Her expression is tense, her voice low. "They're looking for people attending the meeting," she whispers. "Kaufman has men watching the church." Your mother's face drains of colour. "We weren't going." Mrs. Horakova looks sceptical but nods. "Just warning you. 3 families on the second floor got eviction notices today. They were seen talking to the organisers." After she leaves, your father explodes in a rare display of anger. "This is why we keep to ourselves. This is why we don't listen to these union agitators." "And how is that working for us?" your mother snaps back. "Look at you. Look at the children. We're dying here, Joseph." The outburst shocks everyone into silence. Your mother never raises her voice, never challenges your father. The unspoken fear that has been building for months has finally found words. Your father stares at her for a long moment, then turns back to his cigars without replying. What can he say? She's right. The evening meal is a nearly silent affair, a thin potato soup with the last of the stale bread. Nobody mentions the meeting, or the evictions, or the blood on your father's handkerchief. The only sound is spoons against bowls and Anna's occasional cough, which has recently begun to mirror her father's. I talked to a doctor once about what tobacco dust does to children's lungs. She said it's basically like growing up in a house where everyone smokes 3 packs a day, except worse, because the particles are much finer and get deeper into the lungs. Kids who grew up making cigars had the lung capacity of heavy smokers by age 10. After dinner, work resumes, but the rhythm has changed. Your mother now sits at the main rolling station. Maria and Anna continue sorting and stripping, while you've been promoted to binder, wrapping the inner leaf around the filler tobacco to create the cigar's structure. Your father still sits by the window, inspecting and counting, but his movements have slowed. Occasionally he simply stares out at the darkening sky, his expression unreadable. At 7 o'clock you hear noises from the street, voices raised in argument, then a woman crying. Your father motions for you to look out. From your 4th floor window you can see a family being evicted. Furniture and belongings piled haphazardly on the sidewalk, children huddled together on a mattress, a woman pleading with the impassive landlord. You recognize them from the 2nd floor, the Baraneks, a family with 4 children. They were at the cigar factory last week, your father says quietly, talking about better wages. Everyone watches in silence as the family's life is dismantled before their eyes. This is the eternal threat that hangs over every tenement family. One complaint, one missed payment, one act of resistance, and you join the ranks of the truly desperate, the homeless. Back to work, your mother finally says, turning away from the window. We need 200 more before midnight. The work continues by lamplight, the small flame casting long shadows across the room. Your fingers move mechanically now, muscle memory taking over where conscious thought surrenders to exhaustion. Strip, sort, bind, wrap, cut, inspect, pack, repeat, repeat, repeat. The ritual of cigar making has a hypnotic quality. The same movements performed thousands of times create a state almost like dreaming while awake. Sometimes, in these evening sessions, you find your mind wandering back to Bohemia, to green fields and clear air, to the taste of food that isn't permeated with tobacco. You're startled from this reverie by a sound at the door, not a knock, but a soft scratching. Your father motions for everyone to be quiet, then carefully opens it. Standing there is Tomasz, the boy from the new family. His eyes are wide with fear. My father says to warn you, he whispers. Men are checking apartments tonight, looking for union papers. Your father nods his thanks and closes the door. Hide the tobacco, he says immediately, under the blankets. Make it look like we're just sleeping. You all scramble to conceal the evidence of work, the loose tobacco, the tools, the finished cigars. These midnight inspections happen occasionally, not to check living conditions, but to ensure families aren't working beyond their assigned quotas or selling directly to other buyers. Within minutes, the apartment has been transformed from workshop back to living space. The tobacco is hidden under floorboards and blankets, the finished cigars stashed in the small space above the ceiling boards. Your mother has even managed to wipe down the workbench, removing the most obvious tobacco residue. When the heavy knock comes 10 minutes later, you're all sitting on the floor sharing a cup of weak tea, the picture of a family evening. The door opens to reveal Kaufmann and 2 men you don't recognize. Larger, tougher-looking, probably hired muscle. Evening check, Kaufmann announces, pushing past your father into the apartment. His eyes sweep the room, looking for evidence of illicit work or union materials. You're not working? He asks suspiciously. My health, your father replies, coughing as if on cue. We needed rest tonight. Kaufmann's eyes narrow. Interesting time to rest, with the quota short. We'll make it up tomorrow. One of the men is opening cupboards, looking under the bench, even checking the small box where you store personal items. The other stands by the door, blocking any escape. There's talk of troublemakers, Kaufmann says casually. People forgetting their place, getting ideas. We mind our own business, your father assures him. Good. See that you keep it that way. Kaufmann gestures to his men. These gentlemen will be watching the building, for your protection, of course. After they leave, no one moves for several long minutes, afraid they might return. Finally, your mother lets out a breath she's been holding. "They're scared," she says. "The owners, they wouldn't do this if they weren't afraid." Your father says nothing, just begins retrieving the hidden tobacco. The night's work isn't finished, inspection or no inspection. As you help uncover the workbench, you find your thoughts returning to the paper on the pump. The meeting that's happening right now, while you're here hiding tobacco from the man who both supplies it and charges you rent for the privilege of working with it. The injustice of it all hits you anew. Not just the conditions, the tiny room, the endless work, the sickness, but the deliberate designed trap of it. The system that ensures you can never get ahead, never save enough to escape, never even learn the language that might offer a way out. By 10 o'clock everyone is back at work, the brief interruption forgotten in the need to meet quota. Your father has returned to the rolling station, ignoring your mother's objections, his experienced hands nearly doubling the production speed despite his shaking fingers. Through the walls come the muffled sounds of similar scenes playing out across the building. Families rushing to complete their own quotas after the inspection delay. The entire tenement is a factory that never closes, its workers unable to even strike without making themselves homeless. At midnight, your father finally calls a halt. "Enough," he says, surveying the day's production. 510. It will have to do. Not enough to meet the quota, not enough to cover next week's expenses, but all that human bodies pushed to their limits can produce. As the family prepares for sleep, clearing, part of the workbench for you and Maria, arranging blankets for your parents and Anna in the corner, you notice your father pull your mother aside, speaking to her in a whisper too low to hear. Her expression changes from surprise to concern to a grudging agreement. She glances at you, then nods at whatever he's proposing. Later, as you lie on the hard bench beside your sister, you hear your parents talking in the darkness. "It's dangerous," your mother says. "More dangerous than this," your father replies. "Look at Anna's cough. Look at my lungs. We'll all end up in the ground if something doesn't change. And if we're evicted, where will we go? We'll find something. The Horrocks did, after they left. The Horrocks had relatives uptown. The conversation continues in circles, neither willing to concede, neither able to offer a perfect solution to an impossible situation. Eventually they fall silent, exhaustion claiming them both. But the next morning, as you return from fetching water, your father is waiting by the door. "You saw that paper?" he asks quietly. "The one on the pump?" You nod, surprised. "There's another meeting, tonight. I want you to go." Your shock must show on your face because he continues quickly. "Not me. They know my face, and your mother needs to stay with the little ones. But you could slip in, listen, come back and tell us." "What about the men watching the building?" "Mrs. Horokova says they leave for a drink around 9. You can go then. Just listen, Josef. Find out what they're planning." And so, for the first time in your 6 months in America, you have a purpose beyond endless cigar rolling. You have a mission, a dangerous one, yes, but also the first hint of something beyond the suffocating routine of tobacco and sleep. That day, the work seems different somehow. Your fingers still strip and sort, your lungs still burn with tobacco dust, but your mind is elsewhere, imagining what might happen tonight, what you might hear, what possibilities might exist beyond these 4 walls. Your father says nothing more about it, but occasionally you catch him watching you with an expression that might almost be hope. It's been so long since you've seen anything but resignation on his face that the change is startling. By evening, the anticipation has built to a nearly unbearable level. You find yourself watching the window, tracking the fading light, waiting for 9 o'clock to arrive. When it finally does, your father gives a small nod. Your mother hands you a cap to pull low over your face and whispers, "Be careful, be invisible." And then you're out the door, heart pounding, heading for a church basement on Orchard Street, and a meeting that might change everything, or cost your family what little security they have left. As you slip past the men watching the building, temporarily distracted by a bottle shared between them, you can't help but wonder, is this a beginning or an end? A chance at something better, or the final mistake that will push your family from merely desperate to truly destitute? The streets of the Lower East Side at night are both terrifying and exhilarating after months confined to a single room. The smells, horse manure, sewage, cooking food, unwashed bodies, assault your senses, but even these are preferable to the constant tobacco that has defined your existence. You move quickly, head down, following the directions your father whispered. 3 blocks east, 2 blocks south, look for the church with the broken step. And as you round the final corner, you see it. A small crowd slipping into a basement entrance, faces tense but determined. People like you. People tired of endless work for pennies. People ready to risk what little they have for the chance at something more. You take a deep breath and follow them down the steps into darkness and possibility. The basement is packed with bodies, the air thick with something unfamiliar. Not tobacco for once, but tension, hope, fear, all mixed together in this dim space lit by a few sputtering candles. You find a spot against the back wall, pulling your cap low over your eyes. Most people here are adults, tired-looking men and women with the same tobacco-stained fingers as your parents. A few teenagers, no children. You're the youngest by far, and you try to make yourself invisible, just as your mother instructed. At the front of the room stands a man you've never seen before. He's older, maybe 50, with a thick grey moustache and calloused hands that mark him as a worker, not a boss. When he speaks, it's in Czech, but a different dialect than your family's, probably from Prague, based on the accent. Friends, comrades, thank you for the risk you've taken coming tonight. His voice is low but carries through the room. Everyone leans forward slightly, hanging on each word. We all know why we're here. The conditions are killing us, the wages are starving us, the rents are crushing us, and the bosses, our own countrymen, many of them, are growing fat on our labour. Murmurs of agreement ripple through the crowd. Beside you, a woman nods vigorously, her face thin with hunger, but eyes bright with anger. The American unions have failed us, the man continues. They exclude our women, who are half our workforce. They call us rate busters when we have no choice but to accept what's offered. But together, we can form something new, something ours. He holds up a document. This is a charter, a Bohemian Cigar Makers Association. Not just men, everyone who works. One voice, one demand, fair pay for our work. The room erupts in whispers. The idea is radical, revolutionary even. Women in unions, families organising together. It's unheard of. But then again, so is the situation you're all trapped in. Unheard of, inhuman, unbearable. A man near the front stands up. And when they evict us, when they blacklist us, what then, Mr. Dvořák? Dvořák. The name hits you like a punch. This must be a relative of the family upstairs, the son who was taken to the hospital. They can't evict everyone, Dvořák responds. They can't replace all of us at once. That's why we must stand together, all 20 buildings all at once. Another voice. They're already watching. Kaufman had men checking apartments tonight. Of course they're watching, Dvorak says. They're scared. They know their system only works if we're isolated, divided, too afraid to speak. He moves to a small table and unfolds a large paper. Look at these numbers. I've spent months collecting them. You stretch to see. It's a chart of some kind, with figures in neat columns. The average Bohemian family in these tenements makes between $11 and $13 per week making cigars. From this, they pay $10 to $12 in rent. That leaves at most $3 weekly for food, clothes, medicine, everything else. You've never seen the math laid out so starkly before, but it matches exactly what you've lived. The impossible equation of tenement life. Now look here, Dvorak continues. The finished cigars we make sell for between 10 and 30 cents each. 1,000 cigars, which a family might make in a week, sell for between $100 and $300. Yet we receive $3.75 per 1,000. The outrage in the room is palpable. Everyone knew they were being exploited, but seeing the numbers makes it viscerally clear. The factory workers uptown, mostly Americans, make $20 a week for the same work we do for 12. Their union secured this wage. If we organize all Bohemian workers at once, we can demand at least $5 per 1,000. Still far less than fair, but enough to survive on. The meeting continues for another hour. Plans are made. Representatives for each building are chosen. A date is set, 2 weeks from now, for all workers to demand the new rate simultaneously. Papers are distributed with information, figures, demands. You memorize everything, knowing you can't risk taking any papers home. The risk of discovery is too great. As the meeting ends, people file out carefully, leaving in small groups to avoid attention. You wait until most have gone, then slip out and hurry back toward your tenement, mind racing with everything you've heard. The streets feel different now, not just frightening and unknown, but somehow part of a larger world that might, just might, be subject to change. Your family's suffering isn't isolated or unique. It's shared by hundreds, thousands of others, and perhaps together there's strength in that shared experience. When you reach your building, you pause in the shadows, watching. The men who were guarding the entrance earlier are back, passing a bottle between them. You'll never get past them without being seen. Psst, this way. The whisper comes from the alley beside the building. It's Tomasz, the boy from the new family. There's another way in, he says, gesturing for you to follow. Through the cellar. You follow him down a narrow passage between buildings to a small cellar window that's been pried partly open. My father found it, Tomasz explains, for emergencies. The opening is small, but so are you. Bodies kept thin by constant work and insufficient food. You squeeze through after Tomasz, finding yourself in the dank cellar of the tenement. I was at the meeting too, he confesses as you navigate around coal bins and forgotten junk. My father sent me. You're not sure whether to trust him, but you've little choice. He leads you to a narrow staircase that takes you up to the first floor from which you can reach the main stairs. Be careful, he whispers as you part ways. Kaufman's men search 3 more apartments while you are gone. When you finally slip back into your family's apartment, your parents are waiting, faces tight with worry. Anna and Maria are asleep on the workbench, exhausted from the day's labour. What happened? Your father asks immediately. What did they say? You relay everything. The plans for a unified demand, the figures Dvorak presented, the date set for action. Your father listens intently, occasionally nodding. Your mother's expression grows increasingly troubled. $5 per 1,000, your father whispers when you finish. That would change everything. Or cost us everything, your mother counters, if it fails. The three of you sit in silence, weighing hope against risk. The math of survival that has governed your existence thus far has no easy answers for this new equation. We should sleep, your mother finally says. Tomorrow comes early. But sleep proves elusive, your mind racing with possibilities and dangers. The numbers Dvořák presented keep cycling through your thoughts. The stark reality of your family's economics laid bare. So let me break this down for you. The brutal math of tenement survival. The average Bohemian family making cigars in their apartment worked about 17 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's 119 hours weekly. With every family member working, typically parents and at least 2 children, that's over 400 person-hours of labour every week. For this, they'd produce around 3,000 cigars on a good week, earning $11.75 at the standard rate of $3.75 per 1,000. That works out to about 2.8 cents per hour of human labour. Imagine that, less than 3 pennies for an hour of work. From this princely sum, they'd pay between $10-12 in rent, leaving perhaps $1 or $2 for everything else. And I mean everything. Food, clothes, medicine, soap, anything they couldn't make themselves. The next morning dawns with the usual routines: fetching water, clearing away sleeping blankets, setting up the workbench. But something has changed. The air feels different. The mechanical motions of preparing tobacco now carry an undercurrent of possibility, or danger. Act normal, your father mutters as you take your place at the bench. If anyone asks, you never left last night. Work begins in silence. Strip the leaves, sort them, roll, bind, cut. The familiar rhythm that has defined your existence for months. But now, with each cigar completed, you find yourself calculating $3.75 per 1,000 versus $5 the difference between subsistence and something approaching a real life. At noon, there's a knock at the door. Your father answers to find Mrs. Horakova, her expression grave. The Kadleks were evicted this morning, she whispers. 3rd floor. They found papers. A chill runs through the room. The Kadleks have 3 small children. Where will they go? Your mother asks. Relatives in Brooklyn if they're lucky. The street if not. Mrs. Horakova glances at you briefly. Did you? Your father shakes his head minutely, warning her not to continue. After she leaves, the apartment feels smaller somehow, the walls closing in, the risk of what you're contemplating suddenly very real. Perhaps we should wait, your mother says carefully. See what happens with the others first. Your father doesn't respond, just continues rolling cigars, his movements jerky with suppressed emotion. The afternoon passes in tense silence. Even little Anna senses something's wrong, working without her usual quiet humming. Through the walls come the normal sounds of the tenement: coughing, babies crying, the rhythmic sounds of work. But now you hear them differently. Each apartment a family like yours, trapped in the same impossible mathematics of survival. At 3 o'clock, the tobacco buyer arrives for his weekly collection. This is usually your father's job, but today he sends you instead. Count carefully, he instructs. Watch everything he does. You follow the man, Mr. Klein, down to his cart in the street. He's a thin, pinched-looking man with spectacles and a ledger he consults constantly. Every family's production is recorded, every penny accounted for. Novotny, apartment 4B, you tell him. 3,040 cigars this week. He consults his ledger. Quota was 3,500. My father is sick. Clean looks at you dispassionately. Kaufman doesn't pay for excuses. He counts the cigars meticulously, rejecting 14 for minor flaws. A slightly loose wrapper here, a small tear there. Quality control, he calls it. Wage theft, you now understand it to be. 3,026 acceptable, he announces, making a notation. That's $11.35. From his money pouch he counts out the coins, dropping them into your palm with deliberate slowness. You're struck by how small the pile looks. 7 days of non-stop work by 5 people, reduced to a handful of metal. Next week's tobacco, Klein says, handing you a large bundle of leaves. Kaufman says quality is down. Make sure your father knows. The implication is clear. Make better cigars, or the rate might drop even further. You struggle back upstairs with the heavy tobacco bundle. The weight of it, the smell of it, suddenly unbearable. This weekly exchange, tobacco for completed cigars, never quite enough money to cover expenses, is the cycle that keeps your family trapped. When you return to the apartment, your parents are waiting anxiously. How many did he reject? Your father asks immediately. 14. He swears under his breath. Last week it was 10. The week before, 8. They're squeezing us more each time. You hand him the money, which he counts twice before passing to your mother. Her face falls as she quickly calculates. It's not enough, she says simply. It's never enough, your father replies. Your mother takes the small tin box from under the floorboard and adds the new coins. Even with this addition, it's clear there's not enough for both rent and food in the coming week. She begins the grim accounting that happens every Friday. First, she sets aside the rent money, 11.75. This is untouchable. Being evicted means joining the truly desperate on the streets, where survival becomes nearly impossible. That leaves a mere 60 cents for everything else. She divides this with practiced precision. 40 cents for food, she murmurs. 10 for kerosene. 10 for the emergency fund. 40 cents to feed 5 people for a week. The brutal arithmetic of poverty. Maybe I could find other work, you suggest tentatively. After the cigar making, at night. Your father shakes his head. You're already working 16 hours. When would you do this other job? During the 2 hours you sleep. The Dvořák plan is the only way, he continues, lowering his voice. If everyone demands $5 at once, they'll have to agree. They can't replace all of us. And if they don't agree, your mother challenges, if they bring in new immigrants, there's a boat from Europe every day, Josef. The argument circles endlessly, neither side able to definitively prove their case. The risk of action versus the slow death of inaction. There are no good choices, only different flavours of impossible. As evening falls, your mother sends you to the small grocery on the corner with 30 of the precious 40 cents allocated for food. The weekly shopping, a grim exercise in stretching pennies until they scream. The grocery is owned by another Czech immigrant who came 20 years earlier. Like Kaufman, he's grown prosperous from the needs of his countrymen, though less exploitatively. The usual, Mr. Bartosz asks when you enter. You nod. The usual is the bare minimum needed to keep 5 people alive for a week. 5 pounds of potatoes, 2 pounds of flour, a small amount of lard, and if there's enough left, perhaps an onion or 2 for flavour. Bartosz weighs everything carefully, wrapping the items in brown paper. 2 cents more for the potatoes this week, he informs you. Price went up. Those 2 cents mean no onions. It's a constant recalculation, every penny shift requiring immediate adjustments to the delicate balance of barely not starving. "Your father still sick?" Bartosz asks as he hands you the packages. You nod non-committally. "Shame. Good man, hard worker." He leans closer. "Tell him to be careful. Word is Kaufmann's cleaning house. Anyone suspected of union talk." You freeze. "We mind our own business." Bartosz nods, but his expression is skeptical. "Good. Keep it that way. I've seen too many families on the street this month." The walk home feels longer than usual. The weight of the food packages somehow heavier than the tobacco bundles you carry every day. Each potato, each cup of flour represents survival for another day. The 30 cents in your pocket transformed into one more week of existence. In the apartment, your mother immediately begins preparing the evening meal. Potato soup, stretched with flour to create the illusion of volume. The family gathers around the small table that serves as both dining surface and workbench, the tools of cigar making temporarily set aside. Dinner conversation is subdued. No one mentions the meeting, or the Cadlec's eviction, or the fact that this week's payment was short again. These subjects live in the air between you, unspoken but omnipresent. After the meagre meal, work resumes. The evening shift, another 5 or 6 hours of tobacco sorting and rolling before sleep. The only way to possibly catch up on the ever-increasing quotas. As you take your place at the bench, your father suddenly asks, "Did Dvořák say anything about the American unions, if they would support us?" You're surprised by the direct question in front of the others. "He said they've rejected us, called us rate busters." Your father nods grimly. "They don't understand our situation. To them, we're just competition, willing to work for less." "But we're not willing," you say. "We have no choice." "Exactly." He looks at you with something like pride. You understand now. Maria has been listening intently. At 12, she's old enough to grasp the complexities of your situation. What happens if we ask for more money and they say no? The question hangs in the air. No one wants to answer directly, but everyone knows. Eviction, blacklisting, starvation. "We would find another way," your mother finally says, not sounding convinced. The work continues late into the night, the family collectively trying to make up for the previous week's shortfall. By midnight, your fingers are numb, your back aching, your eyes burning from strain and tobacco dust. But the day's production sits in neat piles, 500 cigars, a good day. As the family prepares for sleep, the familiar ritual of clearing part of the workbench, arranging blankets on the floor, a noise from outside draws everyone to the window. In the street below, illuminated by a single gas lamp, another family is being evicted. Their belongings, pathetically few, piled on the sidewalk. A woman clutches a baby, her other children huddled against her skirts. A man argues with the landlord, gesturing desperately to no avail. "The Svobodas," your mother whispers, "5th floor." You watch in silence as their life is dismantled before your eyes. There's nothing you can do. No help you can offer. Your family is one bad week away from the same fate. "This is why we keep quiet," your mother says, turning from the window. "This is why we work." But your father's expression has changed. Where there was hesitation before, now there's something harder. Determination, maybe, or desperation. "No," he says quietly. "This is why we must act. Because this will be us soon enough, whether we speak or not." He turns to you. "Tomorrow, find Tomasz. Tell him we're in." The decision has been made. Your family will join the unified demand for better wages, knowing the risks, knowing the potential consequences. The impossible mathematics of survival has driven you to the only calculation left. The the chance of dramatic change against the certainty of slow defeat. As you lie on the hard workbench beside Maria, sleep eludes you. Through the thin walls come the sounds of the tenement at night. Coughing, crying, occasional laughter. Lives packed together, each fighting their own desperate battle against the same implacable enemy. Poverty engineered by design. Tomorrow you'll find Tomasz. Tomorrow your family will take its stand. Tomorrow the careful arithmetic of survival will give way to a new, more dangerous calculation, the mathematics of resistance. And as the city sleeps around you, thousands of families just like yours lie awake, making the same impossible choices, balancing the same impossible equations, hoping against hope that somehow the numbers might finally add up in their favour. Morning comes too soon, the pale light filtering through your tiny window, finding you already awake. Sleep had been fitful, your dreams filled with evicted families and tobacco leaves that turn to blood in your hands. Your father's decision weighs on you. Tell him we're in. 4 simple words that might change everything, or cost everything. The day begins like all others in the tenement. The communal water pump, the clearing of sleeping blankets from the workbench, the setup of tobacco leaves. But beneath these familiar motions runs an electric current of tension. Your father moves with purpose today, his cough still persistent but somehow less defeating. "I'll go to the market," he announces after breakfast. "A thin gruel made from the last of yesterday's potato peels. We need thread." Your mother gives him a sharp look. Thread is the last thing you need, and the 10 cents in the emergency fund is too precious to waste. But she doesn't argue. She understands that thread is code for something else entirely. After he leaves, she turns to you. "Find Tomasz today. Be careful who sees you talking to him." Maria looks up from her tobacco sorting. "What's happening?" "Nothing you need to worry about," your mother replies, but her tone lacks conviction. When you go for the morning water, you scan the yard for Tomasz, but he's nowhere to be seen. The pump area is crowded with women and children from throughout the building, all engaged in the daily struggle for this most basic necessity. You notice something different today. The conversations stop when you approach. Women give you sidelong glances, some nodding slightly, others turning away. Word has spread somehow. Your family has been marked, either as allies or as risks, you're not sure which. Mrs. Cherney from the second floor catches your eye and deliberately moves away from the other women, positioning herself near the back wall. You follow, pretending to examine a spot on your bucket. "Meeting tonight," she whispers without looking at you. "Same place. Bring a count from your floor. How many are in? How many out?" Before you can respond, she walks away, her face expressionless. The exchange took less than 5 seconds, but your heart pounds as if you'd run a mile. This is really happening. Back in the apartment, the day's work begins in earnest. Your fingers move automatically through the familiar tasks, stripping, sorting, rolling, while your mind races with the implications of what's unfolding. A coordinated demand for higher wages, a direct challenge to men like Kaufman, who control every aspect of your existence. You know what most history books won't tell you? The level of organization that these immigrant communities achieved despite having everything stacked against them. No phones, no common language with the outside world. Many couldn't read or write, and yet they created intricate networks of communication and mutual aid. It was seriously impressive. Around mid-morning, there's a commotion in the hallway, raised voices, a child crying. Your mother opens the door a crack to see a small crowd gathered around the Baranek's apartment 2 doors down. "What's happening?" she asks Mrs. Harakova, who hovers at the edge of the group. "Helena's baby. The fever came back. They're calling for a doctor. Medical emergencies in the tenements are community affairs by necessity. No single family can afford a doctor's visit, but sometimes collections can be taken, costs shared." Your mother glances back at the tobacco piled on your workbench, at the day's work that means survival, then makes a decision. "Anna, stay with Joseph and Maria. Keep working," she instructs, then slips out to join the group in the hallway. Through the thin walls you hear the discussions. Urgent, pragmatic. Who has money to contribute? Who knows of a doctor who might accept payment in installments? Who has medicinal herbs or remedies that might help until professional care can be secured? This is how the isolated Bohemian community survives, through a carefully maintained network of mutual support that stretches meagre resources just far enough to prevent complete collapse. No one has enough individually, but collectively there's a chance. Your mother returns an hour later, her expression grim. "They found a doctor who will come this evening. Everyone gave what they could." "How much did we give?" you ask, already calculating the impact on your food budget. 5 cents, she replies. It was all we could spare. 5 cents. An hour's worth of cigar making by your entire family. The mathematics of poverty require such impossible calculations daily. As the morning progresses, you notice Maria watching you with curious intensity. "What's really happening?" she asks when your mother steps out briefly to check on the Baranek baby. With father going for thread and you looking for Tomash, you hesitate. At 12, Maria is old enough to understand, but knowing puts her at risk too. "People are talking about asking for more money," you finally say, keeping your voice low. "For the cigars." Her eyes widen. "All the people? Together?" You nod. She considers this, her young face serious beyond her years. "Good," she says simply, and returns to her work. Around noon, a knock at the door makes everyone freeze. Your mother answers to find Tomash standing there, his expression carefully neutral. "My mother wonders if you have any salt to spare," he says loudly, clearly for the benefit of anyone listening in the hallway. Your mother invites him in and closes the door. "What news?" she asks immediately. 26 families from our building are in," he reports. 17 are undecided. 8 have refused. The numbers are better than you expected. More than half committed already. "And the other buildings?" your mother asks. "Similar. My father says they only need 60% to make it work. The owners can't replace that many all at once." You notice Tomash looks different today. More alive somehow, energized by purpose. Like your father, he's found something beyond the endless cycle of tobacco and sleep. Something to hope for. "Tell Dvorak we're in," your mother confirms. "All of us." After Tomash leaves, the atmosphere in the small apartment feels changed, lighter, despite the enormous risk you've all just committed to. The endless grinding routine of cigar making continues, but now it's temporarily bounded. 2 weeks until the unified demand. 2 weeks until something breaks, either the system that traps you or your family itself. Your father returns mid-afternoon, ostensibly with thread, but his eyes are bright with news he can't share until the door is closed. "It's happening," he says simply, "all across the east side, not just our buildings, the ones on 38th Street too, and uptown on 73rd. The scope of the action is larger than you'd imagined. Not dozens of families, but hundreds, perhaps thousands." "When?" your mother asks. 2 weeks from today. Everyone stops work. Everyone demands $5 per thousand. No exceptions, no individual negotiations. The audacity of it takes your breath away. A direct challenge to a system designed to keep you isolated, competing against each other for survival. A refusal to accept the impossible mathematics of tenement life any longer. Through the afternoon, you notice increased activity in the building. More people moving through hallways, brief conversations at the water pump, meaningful glances exchanged. The invisible network of the Bohemian community, usually so carefully hidden, has become energized with purpose. But there's danger too. Around 4 o'clock, Kaufman himself appears for an unscheduled inspection. He moves from apartment to apartment, ostensibly checking on production, but his eyes are watchful, suspicious. When he reaches your family's room, he spends longer than usual examining the day's output, asking pointed questions about who has visited, who you've spoken with. "Production seems low today," he comments, running his fingers over the pile of completed cigars. "My health," your father explains, coughing as if on cue. Kaufman's eyes narrow. "I hear your son has been making new friends, the boy from the Harville family." The direct reference to Tomasz sends a chill through the room. "Boys his age need companions," your father replies mildly. "Indeed. Just make sure he chooses the right sort. Some people in this building have troublesome ideas." The threat is clear, if unstated. Kaufman knows something is happening. He may not know exactly what, but he senses the change in the building's atmosphere. After he leaves, no one speaks for several long minutes. The fear is thick enough to taste, mingling with the ever-present tobacco dust. "He suspects," your mother finally whispers. "Of course he does," your father replies. "But he can't prove anything, and he can't evict everyone. Not yet." That evening, the usual routine is interrupted by the arrival of the doctor for the Baranek baby. The entire floor gathers in the hallway, watching as the well-dressed American physician makes his way to the small apartment, his expression one of barely disguised distaste for the conditions. You've seen doctors only from a distance before. They belong to a different world, the world of Americans who can afford medical care, who don't live with tobacco dust in their lungs and constant hunger in their bellies. The examination takes less than 15 minutes. The doctor emerges speaking to Mr. Baranek through a translator, one of the few Bohemians in the building who has mastered enough English to communicate. "Pneumonia," the translator announces. He's given medicine and instructions. The medicine, a small bottle of something, represents another financial burden the Baraneks can ill afford. But the community has already decided this expense is necessary. The health of one child concerns everyone because illness spreads quickly in the close quarters of tenement life. The doctor leaves, clearly relieved to be exiting the tenement. As he passes your family, he wrinkles his nose at the tobacco smell that clings to your clothes, your skin, your very existence. "These people," you hear him mutter to himself in English, "living like animals." Your father, who understands more English than he lets on, stiffens beside you, but he says nothing. Now is not the time for confrontations. After the doctor's visit, the community disbands slowly, people returning to their individual apartments and the never-ending work of cigar making. But something has changed. The collective action of summoning a doctor, of pooling resources to save one child, has reinforced the deeper truth that will fuel the coming labour action. Together, you have power that individually you lack. That night, as the family works by lamplight to complete the day's quota, conversation turns to memories of Bohemia. This happens sometimes. Nostalgia as a brief escape from the crushing reality of tenement life. "Do you remember the festival of St. Wenceslas?" your father asks, his hands working automatically while his mind travels back across the ocean. The music, the dancing, the food, your mother adds with a wistful smile. Real food, roast pork, dumplings, sauerkraut. Little Anna, who was born in America and has never known anything but tenement life, listens wide-eyed. "Tell about the castle again," she begs, "the one on the hill." And so your parents spin tales of Prague Castle, of the Vltava River, of forests and fields, and a life that seems impossibly distant from your current reality. These stories serve a purpose beyond mere entertainment. They're a reminder that your identity extends beyond these four walls, beyond tobacco and poverty and exploitation. You are Bohemian, a people with history, with culture, with pride. The very traits that Kaufman and others exploit to isolate you from mainstream American society also bind you together in ways they cannot control or fully understand. The Bohemian community in New York exists in a strange paradox, isolated from the broader city by language and custom, yet tightly interconnected within itself. This isolation has been weaponized against you, used to create the closed system of tenement cigar making where landlords are also employers and customers. But now, that same close-knit community structure will become the foundation for resistance. As the evening wears on, you notice your father repeatedly glancing out the window at the tenement across the alley. Following his gaze, you see something unusual, a pattern of lights being turned on and off in specific apartments. "They're signalling," he explains when he catches you watching, letting each other know who's in, who's out. The ingenuity of it strikes you, using the very architecture of oppression as a communication tool. The densely packed tenements, designed to maximize landlord profits at the expense of human comfort, now serve as a visual telegraph system that no outsider would recognize. Ordinary history books mostly talk about the big, famous strikes, the headline events. But there were hundreds of smaller labor actions that never made the papers, organized by immigrants who barely spoke English. They had to be incredibly creative just to communicate with each other without getting caught. By midnight, the family has completed the day's quota, 540 cigars, slightly above target. As you help clear the workbench for sleeping, you find yourself studying the tobacco-stained hands of your parents, your sister, even your own. The permanent brown discoloration that marks you all as cigar workers. "Will it wash off?" you ask your mother, showing her your stained fingers. If things change." She shakes her head. "It's in the skin now, part of us." The stains are a visible reminder of how completely the tobacco industry has claimed you, not just your labour and health, but your very bodies marked as its property. As you settle onto the hard bench beside Maria, the sounds of the tenement create their nightly symphony. Coughing, crying, occasional laughter or argument. But tonight, there's something else too. A subtle undercurrent of whispers, of movement, of planning. Through the walls, you hear the Novak family discussing in hushed tones whether to join the action. From the floor above comes the sound of someone practicing a speech in Czech, phrases about dignity, fair wages, justice. The building itself seems alive with possibility, vibrating with the tension of imminent change. The isolation that has defined the Bohemian experience in America, trapped by language, by poverty, by exploitation, has begun to transform into its opposite, solidarity. As sleep finally claims you, your last conscious thought is of the pattern of lights across the alley, blinking their secret messages of resistance. The community that has been denied everything, decent housing, fair wages, basic dignity, has found the one thing that cannot be taken away: each other. And in that connection lies both hope and danger. The power to challenge the system that traps you, and the vulnerability to being crushed by it if you fail. Tomorrow, the preparation continues. The network expands. The unified demand takes shape. 2 weeks until everything changes, for better or for worse. The Bohemian quarter of New York's East Side, so often dismissed by outsiders as a chaotic slum of foreigners, reveals itself to be something far more complex and powerful, a community finding its voice. Days pass with the strange dual existence that has become your family's reality, the mechanical routine of cigar making, continuing on the surface while underneath, a current of resistance builds. Each morning begins with the usual fetching of water, sorting of tobacco, the familiar patterns of survival. But now these motions are punctuated by brief conversations at the pump, subtle nods in the hallway, folded notes passed between apartments. The Bohemian community is organizing itself with remarkable efficiency, given the obstacles. Tenement buildings are divided into sections, each with a representative who reports to Dvořák's central committee. Your father, despite his illness, has become the spokesman for your floor, trusted because of his 6 years in America, respected for his skill at his craft. 10 days until the unified demand. The preparation intensifies. On Wednesday morning, you wake to find your father already gone from the apartment, an unusual occurrence that immediately puts your mother on edge. "Where is he?" Maria asks as she takes her place at the workbench. "Meeting," your mother replies tersely, early before Kaufman's men would notice. The morning's work proceeds with one less pair of hands, a situation that will make meeting quota nearly impossible. But no one complains. The sacrifice of a few hours' production is necessary for what's coming. When your father returns around 9, his face is flushed with both excitement and the effort of climbing 4 flights of stairs with his weakened lungs. He waits until the door is firmly closed before speaking. "It's bigger than we thought," he says, his voice low but intense. "Not just the Bohemians now. The Polish families on 7th Street are joining, and some of the Italians from Mulberry." The news sends a ripple of surprise through the room. The isolation of immigrant communities in New York is normally nearly absolute, each nationality forming its own closed society, often carrying old-world prejudices and rivalries. The idea of Bohemians, Poles and Italians acting in concert is revolutionary. "How?" your mother asks. "They don't speak our language." "Necessity," your father replies. "Their conditions are the same as ours. Same landlords, same wages, same impossible choices." He sits at the workbench, automatically reaching for tobacco despite his obvious exhaustion. The committee has drafted demands. $5 per 1,000 cigars, as we discussed. But also other things. No evictions without 30 days' notice. Repairs to the toilets and water systems. Windows added to the interior rooms. The scope of the action has expanded beyond a simple wage demand into something more comprehensive, a direct challenge to the entire system of tenement exploitation. "And if they refuse?" your mother asks, voicing the question that haunts everyone. Your father's expression hardens. "Then we strike, all of us. No cigars made, no rent paid, until they negotiate." The audacity of it steals your breath. A total withdrawal of both labour and rent would bring the entire economic system of the tenements to a grinding halt. It would also put every participating family at immediate risk of starvation and eviction. "We can't survive long without working," your mother points out. "That's the other part of the plan," your father explains. "Community kitchens, shared resources. Each building will collect what food they can now to be distributed during the strike. Those who have relatives with space will send children to them. Those who have any savings will contribute to those who don't. It's a system of mutual aid born of desperate circumstances, pooling the community's meagre resources to extend survival just long enough to force concessions. Your family spends that day working with unusual intensity, trying to make up for the production lost during your father's absence. Even little Anna works without breaks, her small fingers moving mechanically through the piles of tobacco leaves. By nightfall, the day's quota has been met. Barely. But instead of the usual relief that comes with completing the required production, there's a new tension in the air. Each completed cigar now represents not just survival, but preparation for the coming conflict. After dinner, a thin potato soup that leaves everyone still hungry. Your father takes you aside. "I need you to do something important," he says quietly. "Something dangerous." Your heart quickens at his serious tone. "Take this to the man at this address." He hands you a small folded paper with an address written on it. His name is Jacob Rees. He works for a newspaper. "An American newspaper?" you ask, surprised. Your father nods. He speaks Danish, not Czech, but he understands enough. He's been documenting the tenements with a camera, taking pictures of how we live. Why? Because Americans don't know, or don't want to know, how the cigars they smoke are made, the conditions we live in. Rees is trying to show them. The idea that anyone outside your close community might care about your conditions seems almost fantastical. The Americans you've encountered, doctors, inspectors, police, have looked through you as if you were invisible, or regarded you with open disgust. "When should I go?" "Now, after dark. Be careful. Kaufman's men are watching the buildings more closely now." You tuck the paper into your pocket and prepare for your mission. Your mother gives you an old cap to pull low over your face and wraps a scarf around your neck despite the mild evening temperature. Anything to disguise your identity. This guy, Jacob Rees, was a real badass, by the way. He was an immigrant himself, came from Denmark in 1870, and became obsessed with documenting the awful conditions in New York's slums. He pioneered flash photography so he could show the dark, windowless rooms where people lived and worked. His photos shocked the public because most Americans had no idea how bad things really were. The streets of New York after dark hold different dangers than during the day. You move quickly, head down, trying to look like you have a purpose without drawing attention. The address is on Mulberry Street, an area you've never visited before, populated largely by Italian immigrants. Finding the building takes longer than expected. The streets here follow different patterns than in your neighborhood, and few signs are in languages you can read. But eventually you locate the address, a small office with a sign in English that means nothing to you. A knock on the door brings no response at first. You try again, louder, and finally hear movement inside. The door opens to reveal a man in his 30s with a beard and piercing eyes that study you intently. "Yes?" he asks in English. You panic momentarily. Your English is limited to a few basic phrases. "Dvořák," you say finally, hoping the name will mean something. Recognition flashes in the man's eyes. "Come in," he says, switching to accented but understandable German, a language many Bohemians know at least partially. Quickly. Inside, the office is cluttered with papers, books, and strange equipment you've never seen before, cameras and developing supplies for his photographs. Jacob Rees gestures for you to sit while he locks the door. "You're from the Bohemian quarter?" he asks in German. You nod, handing him the folded note from your father. He reads it quickly, his expression growing more intense. "A unified action," he murmurs. all the buildings at once, bold. He looks at you more carefully now, taking in your tobacco-stained fingers, your too thin frame, the exhaustion evident even in one so young. "How old are you, boy?" he asks. 10. "And you work making cigars?" You nod again. "How many hours each day?" 16, sometimes more. Reese mutters something under his breath that sounds like a curse. Then he reaches for a strange device, a camera with an attached flash apparatus. "Would you permit me to take your photograph? To show the Americans what their cigars cost to make?" The request surprises you. No one has ever wanted your photograph before, but you understand instinctively the power of such an image. A child with tobacco-stained hands and hollow eyes, the visible evidence of exploitation that most Americans never see. "Yes," you say simply. Reese positions you near a window, arranging your hands to show the tobacco stains. The flash when it comes is blinding, a sudden explosion of light that makes you flinch. "Thank you," Reese says when it's done. "This will help tell the story. The Americans need to see." He writes a brief response to your father's note, folds it carefully and hands it to you. "Be careful returning. The landlords have hired men to watch for organizers." The return journey through dark streets feels more dangerous now that you're carrying an actual message related to the labor action. Each shadow seems to hide a potential informant, each passing figure a threat. But you make it back to your building without incident, slipping in through the cellar entrance Tomas showed you. Your father reads Reese's note with evident satisfaction. He will publish something about our conditions next week, and he has contacts with some of the American labor organizations. They might support us despite their previous position. Will it make a difference, you ask, if the Americans know? Your father's expression is complex, hope warring with skepticism born of hard experience. Perhaps. Their opinion matters to the city officials in ways ours never will, and Reese has the ear of Theodore Roosevelt, who has some power in this city. The next day brings the first visible response from the landlords to the rumours of organising. Kaufman arrives with 3 men you've never seen before, tough-looking Americans with the hard eyes and cauliflower ears of professional fighters. They station themselves at the building entrance, watching everyone who comes and goes. "Pinkertons," your father says when he sees them from the window, "strike breakers." The presence of these men changes the atmosphere in the building immediately. People move through hallways with heads down, conversations cease, the water pump area becomes a place for quick, functional visits rather than information exchange. But the organisation continues, now driven underground. Notes passed between apartments through cracks in adjoining walls. Children sent with seemingly innocent messages that contain coded meanings. The light signals across alleyways becoming more complex, more frequent. 7 days until the unified demand. In the afternoon, Kaufman himself conducts an inspection of your apartment, more thorough than any previous visit. He examines the tobacco supply, counts the completed cigars, even looks under the floorboards where your mother keeps the rent money and emergency fund. "Production seems low this week," he comments casually. "Across the whole building, in fact." "My health," your father explains with his now standard excuse. "The cough is worse." Kaufman regards him coldly. "Interesting how many people suddenly have health problems, just when there's talk of trouble." "What trouble?" your father asks innocently. "Don't play games, Novotny. I know what's being discussed. $5 per 1,000? Repairs to the building? Do you have any idea what that would cost?" The direct reference to the demands, which have not yet been formally presented, sends a chill through the room. Someone has informed on the organising efforts, revealed the specific plans being developed. "We're just trying to survive," your father says, dropping the pretense. "The current rate isn't enough to live on. You know this." "You agreed to the rate when you took the apartment," Kaufman replies. "No one forced you. There are 100 families who would take your place tomorrow at $3 per thousand, let alone $3.75. "Then why not replace us?" your father challenges. "If it's so easy." Kaufman's eyes narrow. "Don't tempt me, Novotny. You've been here 6 years. I've been patient with your health issues, your occasional shortfalls. That patience has limits." After he leaves, the family sits in stunned silence for several moments. The confrontation has made the stakes clear. Kaufman knows about the organizing efforts and is prepared to retaliate. The only question is when and how severely. "He's bluffing," your father finally says. "He can't replace everyone at once. The new immigrants don't have the skills yet. It takes months to learn to roll properly." "But he can make examples of the organizers," your mother points out, "starting with us." The reality of your family's vulnerability hangs in the air between you. As a spokesman for your floor, your father is a visible target. The family's eviction would serve as a warning to others considering joining the action. That evening, a meeting of the building's representatives is hastily convened in the cellar, the only space not directly observable by Kaufman's men. Your father attends despite his deteriorating health, the stairs leaving him gasping and pale. You wait anxiously for his return, the apartment feeling empty without his presence. Even the routine of cigar making seems pointless now, the work that has defined your existence suddenly revealed as the mechanism of your own oppression. When your father returns after midnight, his expression tells you everything before he speaks a word. His face is drawn, his eyes hollow with a mixture of anger and resignation. "We've been betrayed," he says simply. "Someone has given Kaufman everything, names, plans, demands, even the date." "What will happen?" your mother asks, her voice barely above a whisper. They're preparing for evictions, starting with the organizers, moving on to anyone who participates. Kaufman has connections with the other landlords. Anyone evicted will be blacklisted from all the buildings. No one will rent to them. No one will give them work. The strategy is brutally effective. Not just punishment, but complete exclusion from the only community where most Bohemian immigrants can survive. Without access to housing in the Czech neighborhoods, without the cigar work that requires no English, families would face not just hardship but potential destruction. "So it's over?" Maria asks from her place by the window. Your father shakes his head firmly. "No, we move faster. The demand will be presented tomorrow, not next week, before they can prepare fully." "But we're not ready," your mother protests. "The food collections, the support system." "We have no choice," your father cuts her off. "They know everything. Every day we wait gives them more time to identify leaders, prepare replacements, strengthen their position. It must be now." The decision sends ripples of both fear and determination through the family. The confrontation you've been preparing for is no longer a distant possibility but an imminent reality. By this time tomorrow, you'll either have begun the process of changing your conditions, or you'll be facing eviction and blacklisting. As you prepare for sleep, going through the motions of clearing the workbench, arranging blankets, the atmosphere in the small apartment is electric with tension. No one speaks much. What is there to say in the face of such momentous risks? Your father sits by the window long after everyone else has settled, staring out at the pattern of lights across the alley. The signals have changed tonight. Faster, more urgent, spreading building by building through the Bohemian quarter. tomorrow, everything changes. The careful, constrained existence you've known, brutal and exploitative as it is, will be deliberately overturned. The unified demand will be presented to all landlords simultaneously. The long-suppressed voice of an entire community will finally be heard. Whether that voice will bring change or destruction remains to be seen. As you drift into uneasy sleep, your final thought is of the photograph Reese took, your tobacco-stained hands and hollow eyes, as evidence for Americans who have never had to consider the human cost of their cigars. Perhaps, somewhere in this vast, indifferent city, someone will see that image and understand what drives people to risk everything for the simple dignity of fair compensation for their labor. The unified demand goes out tomorrow. The strike begins. The battle for survival enters a new and dangerous phase. Dawn breaks with an unusual silence in the tenement. No coughing to mark the day's beginning, no early risers at the water pump, no sounds of work already in progress. Instead, a tense stillness hangs over the building as if the very structure is holding its breath. Today is the day of the unified demand. The strike begins. Your father has been awake for hours, his face grey with exhaustion, but his eyes burning with determination. He sits at the workbench, not working for once but writing, carefully copying the demands in his best handwriting, struggling with the English phrases that someone else has translated for him. They must have it in both languages, he explains when he catches you watching, so there can be no confusion about what we're asking for. $5 per 1,000 cigars, 30 days notice before eviction, repairs to sanitation systems, windows cut into interior rooms to provide ventilation and light, basic human requests that seem revolutionary only because of how completely such basic dignities have been denied. Your mother moves through the apartment with tense efficiency, her worry evident in the tight line of her mouth. She has lived through strikes before, in Bohemia. She knows how quickly they can turn violent, how desperate authorities become when their power is challenged. Eat, she instructs, placing before each family member a slightly larger portion of bread than usual, a small luxury purchased with the emergency fund. We don't know when we'll eat again. The morning meal is consumed in silence, each person lost in their own thoughts about what the day might bring. Little Anna, sensing the tension but not understanding its cause, keeps glancing at each face with worried eyes. Is something bad happening? She finally asks. Your father considers her for a moment before answering. Something necessary, he says finally. And yes, it might be hard, but it's for a better life. For all of us. Around 9 o'clock, a soft knock at the door announces Tomasz. It's time, he says simply. Everyone is gathering in the yard. Remarkably, the residents of the entire building have managed to organize this assembly without alerting Kaufmann's watchman. The system of signals, messengers, and coded communications has worked, bringing people together at the precise moment required. Your family joins the stream of people moving quietly down the stairs and into the small concrete yard behind the tenement. The space, usually empty save for the water pump and ash barrels, is now packed with humanity. Every resident of the building, from infants to the elderly. The diversity of the crowd strikes you anew. Not just Bohemians now, but Poles, a few Germans, even some Italians from the neighbouring building who have joined the action in solidarity. All immigrant workers trapped in the same exploitative system, all united now in a demand for basic dignity. Dvořák stands on an overturned crate at the centre of the gathering, copies of the demands in his hand. He speaks first in Czech, then attempts broken English, then German, ensuring everyone understands what is about to happen. "Today we speak with one voice," he says, his words translated in whispers throughout the crowd, not as individuals who can be ignored or replaced, but as a community that will be heard. The plan is simple in concept, though breathtaking in its audacity. Representatives from each floor will deliver the demands simultaneously to all landlords. No one will work until negotiations begin. No one will pay rent. The entire economic system of the tenements will grind to a halt until the demands are addressed. Your father steps forward as the spokesman for your floor, the formal demands clutched in his hand. Despite his illness, despite the risks, he stands straight-backed and resolute. In this moment, he is transformed from a sick man bent over a workbench to a leader fighting for his community's survival. Representatives are chosen from each floor, from each building participating in the action. Together, they will form a delegation too large to be easily dismissed or arrested. As the meeting concludes and people begin to disperse, you notice Kaufman's men have finally realized something is happening. Two burly figures appear at the yard entrance, watching with suspicious eyes. But they're too late. The organization is complete, the plan in motion. Your mother pulls you close as the crowd breaks up. "Stay with me today," she says quietly. "Don't wander, no matter what happens." Back in the apartment, the strangest thing occurs. Nothing. For the first time in your memory, the workbench remains empty of tobacco. No one takes their position at the familiar stations of stripping, sorting, rolling. The tools of your trade, the small knives, the molds, the cutters, sit unused. Instead, your father prepares to leave with the other floor representatives, the demands securely in his pocket. "If I'm not back by nightfall," he tells your mother in a low voice, "take the children to Mrs. Horakova. She has relatives uptown who can hide you if necessary." The possibility that he might not return hangs in the air, unacknowledged but understood by everyone. Labor actions in America frequently turn violent. Police or private security hired to break strikes, organizers arrested or beaten, sometimes worse. I once talked to a labor historian who told me that between 1870 and 1900, at least 500 workers were killed during strikes in the US, shot by police, security guards, or militias. The authorities viewed labor organizing as a direct threat to social order, and they responded with serious force. Your mother simply nods, her face composed even as her hands twist nervously in her apron. "Be careful," is all she says. After your father leaves with the delegation, the waiting begins. The apartment feels strangely empty without the constant activity of cigar making that has defined your existence for so long. The silence is almost uncomfortable. No rustling of tobacco leaves, no scrape of knives against the workbench, no quiet instructions passed between family members. "What do we do now?" Maria asks, looking lost without her usual tasks. "We wait," your mother replies, "and we prepare." Preparation means inventorying the family's meager resources, counting every scrap of food, every penny in the emergency fund, assessing how long you can survive without income if the strike continues. The mathematics is grim. Even with careful rationing, you have perhaps 3 days of food. The rent is due in 5 days, and the tin box under the floorboard contains barely half the required amount. The strike must succeed quickly, or starvation and eviction will force its collapse. Throughout the morning, you hear unusual sounds in the building, people moving in the hallways during hours when they would normally be working, quiet conversations through open doors, children playing who would usually be helping with tobacco production. The entire rhythm of tenement life has been disrupted. Around noon, shouts from the street draw you to the window. Looking down, you see a large crowd gathered outside the building's entrance. Not residents, but other men, rough-looking, many with clubs or iron bars in their hands. "Strike breakers," your mother says tensely, pulling you back from the window. "Hired to scare us, maybe worse." The presence of these men, hired thugs brought in to intimidate the striking workers, changes the atmosphere in the building immediately. Doors close, conversations quiet, children are brought inside from hallways. The brief sense of community freedom gives way to a new wariness. Hours pass with no word from your father or the delegation. Through the window, you watch the strikebreakers maintain their position outside the building, occasionally shouting threats or insults up at the windows. Twice, police officers walk by without intervening, making it clear which side they support in this conflict. By late afternoon, hunger begins to gnaw at everyone. Your mother carefully cuts the remaining bread into small pieces, giving the largest to little Anna, whose confusion has given way to fear as the tension in the apartment increases. "When is Papa coming back?" she asks repeatedly. "Soon," your mother always answers, though her eyes betray her uncertainty. Just before sunset, a commotion in the street draws you back to the window. The delegation is returning. Dozens of men walking together for safety, your father among them. The strikebreakers form a gauntlet they must pass through to enter the building. Insults are hurled first, then small stones and bits of garbage. One of the delegates is shoved, nearly falling. Another responds angrily and is immediately struck with a club. Within seconds, the scene dissolves into violence. Clubs swinging, men falling, shouts and screams filling the air. Your mother pulls you from the window. "Don't watch," she says sharply, but it's too late. You've already seen your father caught in the melee, trying to help another man who's been knocked down. The sound of breaking glass makes everyone jump. Someone has thrown a rock through a window on the second floor. Then another crash, and another. The attack on the building itself has begun. "Under the workbench," your mother orders, pushing all three children into the small space beneath the heavy table. "Stay there." She moves quickly around the apartment, gathering essential items. The rent money from beneath the floorboard, the small photograph from Bohemia, a change of clothes for each child. Everything goes into a bundle made from a bedsheet. "If they come up here," she instructs, her voice steady despite the chaos outside, "we go out the back way, down the fire escape. Stay together. No matter what happens, stay together." The violence outside continues for perhaps 20 minutes, though it feels much longer. Then, gradually the shouting subsides. The crashes stop. An uneasy quiet descends. Your mother ventures to the window, peering cautiously down at the street. "They're leaving," she reports. "The police finally came." Only then does she allow you to emerge from under the workbench. "Now we wait for your father." The waiting stretches on as darkness falls. Other men from the delegation have returned to their apartments. You hear their voices in the hallway, their family's relief. But your father is not among them. By 9 o'clock, worry has etched deep lines in your mother's face. She paces the small apartment, occasionally checking the hallway, returning each time with a tighter expression. Finally, a knock. But when she opens the door, it's not your father but Mrs. Horakova and Tomash's father, Mr. Havel. Their expressions tell you everything before they speak a word. "He's been arrested," Mr. Havel says quietly, along with Dvorak and 3 others. "Arrested? For what?" your mother demands. "Inciting a riot," they're saying, "disturbing the peace." The absurdity of it, that those attacked would be charged rather than the attackers, is so common in immigrant experience as to be almost expected. justice, like decent housing and fair wages, is a luxury not extended to people like you. What will happen to him? Your mother asks. Mrs. Horakova and Mr. Havel exchange glances. They'll keep him at least overnight, Mrs. Horakova finally says. Maybe longer. The magistrate doesn't see cases until Monday. Monday. 4 days away. 4 days without your father's labour, without his protection, with the rent coming due and food already scarce. And the strike? Your mother asks. It continues, Mr. Havel says firmly. The demands were delivered to all the landlords. Some are already talking about negotiating rather than losing more production. After they leave, your mother sits at the workbench, her face in her hands. For a moment, just a moment, you see her composure crack. A single sob escapes before she masters herself again. What will we do? Maria asks quietly. Your mother straightens, her decision made. We continue as well. No work until your father returns and the demands are met. That night, sleep is fitful for everyone. The apartment feels exposed, vulnerable without your father's presence. Every sound in the hallway, every shout from the street might herald new danger. You dream of tobacco leaves that turn to flames in your hands, of workbenches that collapse, of your father lost in a maze of tenement hallways calling your name. You wake repeatedly, disoriented by the absence of the familiar weight of his coughing in the night air. Morning brings new challenges. With your father gone, the family's already limited options narrow further. Your mother takes charge with quiet determination, assigning each child specific tasks to extend your meagre resources. Joseph, take Anna and check all the ash barrels behind the building, she instructs. Sometimes people throw away food that can still be used. Maria, go to Mrs. Horakova and see if she has any potato peelings we can boil for soup. The ash barrels, normally repositories for tobacco stems and household waste, occasionally yield usable items discarded by residents with slightly more resources. Today, your search uncovers several potato ends, an onion too soft for some family but still usable if cut carefully, and a chicken bone with scraps of meat still clinging to it. These meagre findings, combined with Maria's success in obtaining potato peelings from Mrs. Horakova, will become the day's meal, a thin soup that will quiet hunger pangs without truly satisfying them. Throughout the tenement, similar scenes play out as families pool increasingly scarce resources. The community support system Dvořák described begins to take shape organically. Those with a little extra sharing with those who have nothing, information about where food might be found passing from apartment to apartment. By mid-morning, word spreads through the building. Representatives from several landlords want to meet with the strike committee. The unified action is having an effect faster than anyone anticipated. With thousands of cigars going unproduced daily, the economic pressure is mounting on the manufacturers who depend on this low-cost labour. But there's other news too. Kaufmann is among those refusing to negotiate. He's bringing in new workers from the arriving immigrants at the docks, offering apartments and work to desperate newcomers unaware of the strike. Scabs, someone in the hallway spits out the word like a curse. Strike breakers. The use of replacement workers is the oldest and most effective tactic against labour actions. With a constant flow of new immigrants arriving daily, each more desperate than the last, finding replacements willing to work for even less than the current rate is all too easy. By afternoon, the first new family arrives. You watch from the window as they're escorted into the building by Kaufmann's men, their meagre possessions carried in bundles much like those your family brought 6 months earlier. Their faces show the same mixture of hope and fear that must have been on yours when you first saw the tenement that would become your prison and workplace. They don't know, Maria says softly beside you at the window. They don't understand what's happening. They will soon enough, your mother replies. As the day progresses, the reality of the strike settles into the building like a physical presence. Hallways that would normally echo with the sounds of work are quiet. The usual smell of tobacco is gradually replaced by the odours of closely packed humanity with no income to mask its conditions. Unwashed bodies, overflowing toilets, the beginnings of genuine hunger. In other buildings participating in the action, similar scenes unfold. Occasionally, messengers slip past the watchman to bring updates, this landlord considering the demands, that one bringing in replacements, another evicting the most visible organisers. The unified front is beginning to show cracks under the pressure of immediate survival needs. Families with young children or sick members face impossible choices: continue the strike and watch their vulnerable suffer, or return to work and betray the collective action. By evening, 3 families in your building have quietly resumed cigar making, unable to bear the prospect of another day without income. No one blames them openly. The mathematics of tenement survival allows little room for principles when children are hungry. Your own family faces the same brutal calculations. The soup from salvaged scraps barely quiets the constant gnawing in your stomach. Little Anna has grown listless, her usual energy sapped by hunger and worry. Your mother's face is drawn with the strain of decisions no parent should have to make. Tomorrow, she says as darkness falls, we will try to visit your father at the police station. Perhaps they will allow us to bring him food. The idea that you would sacrifice your own meagre rations to feed someone in jail speaks volumes about both family loyalty and the conditions of 19th century incarceration, where prisoners were often expected to provide their own sustenance or go without. That night, as you lie on the hard work bench that serves as your bed, the tenement around you feels different. Not just your own building, but the entire Bohemian quarter of the East Side. The isolation that has defined your community's experience has cracked, revealing both vulnerability and unexpected strength. Through the walls come the sounds of quiet conversations, occasional crying, the shuffle of people moving in hallways during hours when they would normally be sleeping. The disruption of normal patterns has revealed how completely the rhythm of tenement life was dictated by the demands of tobacco production. In the darkness, Maria whispers beside you, "Will it work? Will they give us more money?" You have no answer to give her. The adult calculations of power, resistance, and survival are still beyond your full comprehension. All you know with certainty is that something has changed, not just in the external conditions of your life, but in how you understand your place within them. For the first time, you've seen your community act rather than simply endure. Whether that action brings improvement or greater hardship remains to be seen. But the silence of the workbench, the absence of the constant production that has defined your existence, feels like both loss and possibility. Tomorrow, you will try to see your father. Tomorrow, the consequences of resistance will become clearer. Tomorrow, the brutal mathematics of survival will demand new calculations from everyone involved in this unprecedented attempt to change the equation of tenement life. For now, sleep comes in fits and starts, hunger and worry taking turns keeping you awake. The tenement breathes around you, a collective organism finding its voice after decades of enforced silence. Dawn of the third day of the strike brings a sound you'd almost forgotten: rain. It drums against the small window, streaming down the glass in rivulets that distort your view of the tenement across the alley. In the grey morning light, The building looks more like a prison than ever, its windows dark, its walls slick with moisture. Your mother has been awake for hours, preparing for the visit to the police station. She set aside a small portion of bread, precious food you can ill afford to share, and wrapped it carefully in a scrap of clean cloth. Her face shows the strain of another night without sleep, another day of impossible decisions. "Joseph, Maria, you'll come with me," she says as she combs Anna's hair with her fingers, trying to make the child presentable enough for a police station visit. "We must look respectable. The Americans notice these things. The irony isn't lost on you, that people forced to live in squalor by poverty wages must somehow appear respectable, to appeal to the very authorities who enable their exploitation. But your mother understands the unwritten rules of survival in America. Appearances matter, especially when you have nothing else." Breakfast is a few spoonfuls of watered-down broth saved from yesterday's soup, barely enough to quiet the constant gnawing in your stomach. Even this meagre meal is a luxury compared to what some families in the building are facing. Through the walls, you've heard children crying from hunger, mothers trying to soothe them with promises of food that may never materialize. The rain continues as you leave the building, soaking through your thin clothes almost immediately. The police station is 15 blocks away, a journey you've never made before. Your mother leads with determined steps, Anna's small hand clutched in hers, you and Maria following close behind. The streets of New York on a rainy morning reveal the city's stark divisions even more clearly than usual. Well-dressed businessmen hurry past with umbrellas, barely glancing at the beggars huddled in doorways. Carriages splash through puddles, their occupants dry and comfortable behind glass windows. Meanwhile, children even younger than Anna search through garbage for anything salvageable. "Is this what they meant by America being the land of opportunity?" Maria whispers, as you pass a particularly grim scene. A woman with an infant begging outside a restaurant where diners visible through the window seem to be enjoying elaborate breakfasts. "For some it is," your mother replies, having overheard. "For others—" She doesn't need to finish the sentence. The evidence surrounds you. The police station, when you reach it, is imposing. A solid brick building with stern-faced officers guarding the entrance. Your mother straightens her shoulders, smooths Anna's hair one more time, and approaches with the careful deference she's learned is necessary when dealing with American authorities. "My husband," she says in her limited English, "Josef Novotny, arrested 2 days ago." The officer at the desk barely looks up from his papers. "Charges." Your mother looks helplessly at you. The legal terminology is beyond her English capabilities. "Disturbing the peace," you offer, recalling what Mr. Havel had said, "from the strike." At the word strike, the officer's demeanour changes, his expression hardening. "The cigar makers," he says with clear disdain, "causing trouble." "We just want to see him," your mother pleads. "Bring food." She holds up the small package of bread. The officer considers for a moment, then jerks his head toward a bench against the wall. "Wait there." The wait stretches from minutes to hours. Anna grows restless, then hungry, then falls asleep on your mother's lap. Other visitors come and go, most better dressed, most receiving much prompter attention. The building smells of sweat, tobacco, a different, stronger variety than you work with, and the distinctive odour of unwashed bodies in close confinement. Finally, around noon, a different officer approaches. "Novotny, come with me." You follow him through a heavy door and down a corridor lined with cells. The stench intensifies, human waste, body odour, desperation. From some cells come voices, sometimes in English, often in other languages. Pleas, complaints, occasional sobs. Near the end of the corridor, the officer stops. 10 minutes, he says curtly, unlocking a cell door. Inside, your father sits on a narrow bench, his face pale and drawn, a fresh bruise darkening one cheekbone. When he sees your family, his expression transforms, relief mingled with shame at being seen in such circumstances. "Are you all right?" your mother asks immediately, switching to check now that they're relatively alone. "Well enough," he replies, though his voice suggests otherwise. "They questioned us for hours, wanted names of other organisers." "Did you tell them?" Maria asks, wide-eyed. Your father's expression hardens. "Of course not." He gestures to his bruised face. "This was their response to my silence." The casual brutality isn't surprising. Police violence against immigrant strikers is common enough to be expected. But seeing its evidence on your father's face makes it viscerally real in a way stories never could. "The strike?" he asks. "It continues?" Your mother nods. Most are still holding out, but some families have returned to work. The hunger? He understands immediately. And our family? We have enough for another day, perhaps two. The careful neutrality of her tone doesn't hide the desperation beneath. Without income, without your father's labour, starvation isn't a distant threat but an imminent reality. "When will they release you?" you ask. Your father's laugh is hollow. The magistrate sees cases on Monday, if he's not too busy, if he cares about Bohemian cigar makers, which he won't. Monday. 3 more days. The mathematics is simple and brutal. You won't last that long without food. Some landlords are negotiating, your mother offers. Mr. Avell says 3 have agreed to $4 per 1,000. Not the 5 we demanded, but... And Kaufman? She shakes her head, still refusing, bringing in new workers. Your father absorbs this, his expression calculating. The unified front is breaking, some landlords yielding partially, others holding firm, the workers themselves divided by the impossible pressure of immediate survival needs. "Listen to me," he says urgently as the officer begins to approach, indicating your time is nearly up. "Take the $4 if it's offered. It's not enough, but it's something. We can't hold out forever." "But the strike," you begin. "The strike has already accomplished something," he cuts you off. "It's shown them we're not helpless. Not completely. That matters." The officer bangs on the cell bars. Time's up. Your mother quickly presses the small package of bread into your father's hands. He tries to refuse, knowing how desperately you need it, but she insists. "Stay strong," he tells all of you, as the cell door closes between you. Whatever happens. The walk back to the tenement feels longer, the rain having intensified from a steady drizzle to a downpour. By the time you reach your building, all 4 of you are soaked to the skin, chilled despite the summer temperature. The news of your visit spreads quickly through the building, everyone hungry for information about the arrested men, about police intentions, about how long this fragile resistance can possibly continue. In the hallway outside your apartment, a small crowd gathers as your mother relates what little she learned. Other families facing the same impossible calculations hang on every word, looking for guidance, for hope, for permission to surrender if surrender becomes the only way to feed their children. Dvorak and the others were there too, she tells them. They've been questioned, some roughly. She gestures to indicate the bruises you saw on your father's face, but they've said nothing, given no names. "And the magistrate won't see them until Monday?" Mrs. Horakova asks, the worry clear in her voice. Your mother nods. "If then." The implication is clear to everyone. Few families can hold out that long without income. The strike that began with such solidarity, such determination, is collapsing under the simple, brutal weight of starvation. "What do we do?" someone asks. Your mother repeats what your father told her. "Take the $4 if it's offered. It's not everything, but it's something." The crowd disperses slowly, each family returning to their apartment to make their own impossible decisions. Some will continue to hold out, clinging to the original demands. Others will accept the partial victory of $4 per thousand. Still others will return to work at the original rate, unable to bear another day of their children's hunger. That evening, a messenger arrives at your apartment, one of the children employed by the strike committee to carry communications between buildings. "News," he says breathlessly. "Kaufmann wants to meet with representatives tomorrow." The unexpected development sends ripples of hope through the building. Kaufmann, the most hardline of the landlords, the one bringing in replacement workers and refusing all negotiation, suddenly willing to talk. Something has changed. "Why?" your mother asked the boy. "What's happened?" "The newspaper," he explains. "The one with the Danish man, Rees. He published pictures, story about the tenements, about the cigar makers. The Americans are angry about how we live." Jacob Rees's photographs and reporting, including perhaps the image he took of your tobacco-stained hands, have accomplished what direct appeals could not. They've made the invisible visible, forced comfortable Americans to confront the human cost of their cigars. That night, hope makes sleep even more elusive than hunger. The possibility of change, real change, seems tantalizingly close. Yet experience has taught everyone in the tenements to be wary of hope. It's often merely the prelude to deeper disappointment. Morning brings clear skies and news that spreads through the building like fire. Kaufmann and 3 other major landlords have agreed to meet with worker representatives at noon. The location is neutral ground, a church on 14th Street whose pastor has sympathies with the labour movement. With your father still in jail, the tenants on your floor choose Mrs. Horakova to represent them. Her English is limited but better than most, and her dignity commands respect even from Americans. As she prepares to leave for the meeting, she stops by your apartment. "What should I ask for?" she inquires of your mother. "What is most important?" "The wage increase first," your mother replies without hesitation. $5 per thousand if possible, no less than 4. Then windows for the interior rooms. The rest can wait if necessary. The pragmatism of tenement life, knowing which survival needs must be addressed immediately and which can be deferred, guides even this unprecedented moment of potential change. The hours of waiting while the meeting takes place are excruciating. No work occurs anywhere in the building, everyone too focused on the outcome to maintain even the pretense of normal routine. Children play quietly in hallways, adults gather in small groups, speculating, hoping, fearing. Around 3 o'clock, Mrs. Horakova returns, her expression unreadable as she makes her way through the crowd that immediately forms around her. "Well," someone calls out, "what happened?" She waits until reaching the centre of the group before speaking, understanding the importance of everyone hearing the news simultaneously. $4.50 per thousand, she announces. Effective. Immediately. A murmur runs through the crowd, not the jubilation of complete victory, but the cautious satisfaction of meaningful improvement. "And the other demands?" your mother asks. "Windows to be added to interior rooms within 3 months. Repairs to toilets and water systems to begin next week." Mrs. Horakova pauses. "And the men who are arrested, including your husband, to be released tomorrow with charges dropped." This last news brings the first real celebration, a cheer running through the gathered residents. The immediate return of the arrested men means not just emotional relief for their families, but the critical restoration of their labour and income. "Did they say why they agreed?" someone asks. Mrs. Harakova's expression turns grim. The newspapers, the photographs, Americans talking about boycotting cigars made in sweatshop conditions. They care more about public opinion than about us, but it worked in our favour this time. The victory, such as it is, contains important lessons about power and visibility that no one in the tenements will soon forget. Direct appeals to fairness accomplished little, but the threat of financial consequences brought immediate concessions. As the crowd disperses, a new energy flows through the building. Not just relief at the end of the strike, but something more profound. A collective realization that conditions once thought immutable can indeed be changed through unified action. Your mother returns to the apartment with tears in her eyes, the first you've seen since arriving in America. "Your father will be home tomorrow," she says, embracing each of you in turn. The next day dawns clear and cool, a perfect late summer morning. The tobacco buyer arrives earlier than usual, distributing fresh leaves to all apartments, offering the new rate without being asked. The speed with which the landlords implement the wage increase speaks volumes about their fear of renewed action if they delay. By mid-morning, normal sounds return to the tenement, the rustle of tobacco leaves being sorted, the scrape of knives against workbenches, the murmur of families working together. But there's a difference too, a subtle shift in how people carry themselves, how they speak to each other in hallways and at the water pump, a new dignity born of collective achievement. Just after noon, your father returns, accompanied by Dvořák and the other arrested men. The entire building seems to vibrate with the energy of their homecoming, people stepping out of apartments to applaud as they climb the stairs, children running ahead to spread the news of their arrival. When your father enters your apartment, he seems simultaneously diminished and enlarged by his ordeal, thinner, more exhausted, but standing straighter, his eyes clearer than you've seen them in months. Your mother embraces him wordlessly, then immediately sets him in the single chair by the window, bringing water, examining his bruised face with gentle fingers. "I'm fine," he assures her, though the rasp in his voice suggests his cough has worsened during his time in the damp jail cell. "We won," Maria tells him excitedly, $4.50. "So I heard." He smiles, a rare expression that transforms his careworn face. "Not the 5 we asked for, but more than I expected them to give. And windows," you add, "real windows for the interior rooms." The significance of this seemingly small concession cannot be overstated. Natural light and ventilation in the interior rooms will change everything, reducing disease, improving working conditions, making the endless hours at the bench slightly more bearable. That afternoon, for the first time since the strike began, your family returns to cigar making. The familiar rhythm of work resumes, stripping, sorting, rolling, cutting, but something has changed. The labour that once felt like a prison sentence now carries a different meaning. Not freedom, not even close, but a small step toward something better. The mathematics has shifted slightly in your favour. At $4.50 per 1,000 cigars, a family producing 3,000 per week will earn $13.50. Still barely enough to cover rent and basic necessities, but the difference between slow starvation and basic survival. "It's just the beginning," your father says quietly as you work side by side at the bench. "Now they know we can organise. Next time, we'll ask for more." Next time. The very concept would have been unimaginable just weeks ago, when the endless cycle of tobacco and debt seemed as immutable as the seasons. In the days that follow, subtle changes spread through the Bohemian quarter. Jacob Rees returns with his camera, documenting the promised improvements as they begin. Workers installing windows in interior rooms, repairs being made to sanitation systems. His presence serves as both witness and warning to the landlords. The invisible has been made visible and cannot be unseen. A week after the strike's resolution, a different kind of visitor appears at your door. A woman from one of the American settlement houses that work with immigrants. She speaks no Czech, but through a translator explains that they're establishing a night school for Bohemian adults and children who wish to learn English. Free, your mother asks suspiciously, accustomed to hidden costs in every supposedly charitable offering. Completely free, the translator confirms. 2 evenings each week. Your father considers the offer carefully. English has been the invisible barrier that has kept your family trapped in cigar making, unable to access other jobs, other opportunities. But learning would mean time away from production, income temporarily reduced. Joseph will go, he decides finally, and Maria when she's a bit older. The investment in future possibilities, even at the cost of present sacrifice, represents perhaps the most profound change wrought by the strike. For the first time, your family can think beyond immediate survival, can imagine a life not entirely defined by tobacco and tenements. The woman leaves information about the classes and promises to return. After she's gone, your father studies the English paper she left behind, his expression thoughtful. Everything begins with language, he says. Without English, we remain isolated. With it, perhaps. He doesn't complete the thought, but he doesn't need to. The possibilities hang in the air, as tangible as the tobacco dust that still fills the apartment despite the promised ventilation improvements. Fall arrives, bringing cooler temperatures and changes both subtle and profound to tenement life. The promised windows are installed in interior rooms, allowing natural light to penetrate spaces that have been dim for decades. Repairs to toilets and water systems make daily existence slightly less hazardous, slightly more dignified. You begin attending the English classes twice weekly, your young mind absorbing the new language more quickly than you'd imagined possible. Each new word, each successfully constructed sentence, feels like a key unlocking a door that has kept your family confined. Your father's health improves somewhat with the addition of ventilation to your apartment, though years of tobacco dust have left permanent damage to his lungs. He will never be truly well again, but the constant debilitating cough gradually subsides to something more manageable. The Bohemian community itself has been transformed by the experience of collective action. The isolation that once defined immigrant existence has given way to a new awareness of shared interests, shared power. When a family faces crisis, illness, job loss, unexpected expenses, the support network mobilizes quickly, efficiently, extending meager resources just enough to prevent complete collapse, and the work continues, the endless cycle of tobacco and cigars that still defines daily existence for most Bohemian families. But now there's a difference. $4.50 per thousand instead of $3.75. Windows that allow fresh air to circulate. Small improvements that mean the difference between bare survival and the first fragile shoots of something that might, someday, resemble prosperity. One evening in late October, as your family works by the light of a lamp supplemented now by moonlight through your new interior window, your father puts down his cutting tool and looks around at each of you. "I've been thinking," he says, An unusual preface that immediately captures everyone's attention. Joseph is learning English quickly. By next year he might be able to find other work, something away from tobacco. The possibility hangs in the room like a tangible thing, a future not defined by cigar making, not trapped in the closed system of tenement labour. "What kind of work?" your mother asks cautiously. "The settlement house people say there are apprenticeships sometimes, in trades, carpentry, printing." He looks at you. "Things with a future." A future. The concept seems almost foreign after months of existence focused entirely on immediate survival. The idea that you might someday do something other than roll cigars, might escape the tobacco dust and bent back and permanent stains, it's almost too much to hope for. "It would mean less income initially," your father continues, always practical, "but eventually much more." The family discussion that follows isn't about whether to pursue this possibility. That decision is made the moment it's suggested, but about how to manage the transition. Which expenses can be reduced further to offset the temporary income loss? How will production be redistributed among the remaining family members? The practical mathematics of tenement life applied to a new equation that includes hope as a variable. That night, as you lie on your usual hard bench beneath thin blankets, the apartment feels different. The tobacco smell remains, of course. It's seeped into the walls, the floor, your very skin. But now there's fresh air too. Moonlight streaming through the new window, casting unfamiliar patterns on the ceiling. The Bohemian quarter of New York's East Side sleeps around you. Thousands of families in hundreds of tenements, each navigating their own version of the immigrant experience. The conditions remain harsh, the work endless, the exploitation real despite the small victories won. But something has changed, not just in the physical reality of windows and wages, but in how these immigrant communities understand their place in America. No longer entirely powerless, no longer completely isolated, capable, when necessity demands, of speaking with one voice that even the powerful must hear. Your father's breathing from the corner has changed too, still laboured from years of tobacco dust, but no longer the desperate rattle that once kept you awake at night. The slight improvement in conditions has meant the difference between rapid decline and possible stability. As sleep finally approaches, your thoughts drift to the English words you've recently learned: future, opportunity, possibility. Words that have begun to have meaning beyond their dictionary definitions. Words that represent doorways, however narrow, to a life not entirely defined by tobacco and tenements. And while the Bohemian immigrants of New York's East Side would continue to face discrimination, exploitation, and hardship for decades to come, the small victories of that summer would echo forward through generations. Your generation, learning English, finding new work, gradually moving beyond the tobacco-stained existence that once seemed inescapable. The road ahead remains long and difficult, but tonight, in this moment of relative peace, with fresh air coming through a window that didn't exist a month ago, with your father's breathing steadier than it's been in years, with English words taking root in your mind, tonight, sleep comes easier than it once did. The tenement has not become a home, not yet, but it has become perhaps something slightly less than a prison. As you drift towards sleep, the building around you settles too. Hundreds of families in their small apartments, most still bent over tobacco even at this late hour, working by lamplight, bound together by shared struggle and small triumphs. And as your eyes grow heavy, think of those tobacco-stained hands from long ago, working towards something better, something beyond mere survival. Those immigrant families who found the courage to demand dignity when everything was stacked against them. Who worked 17-hour days in rooms without windows for pennies an hour, yet somehow found the strength to imagine a different future. Their struggles echo even now, in a world they could hardly imagine, as you rest in comfort they never knew. Remember them as you close your eyes, as your breathing slows, as you drift toward dreams in a world built in part by their tobacco-stained hands and their